Chapter 276, Class. I saw it. It was really a giant made of stone. It was covered in blue flames. It was too powerful. The giant bear was easily kicked away by it. Wizard, it must be a wizard. It was a wizard who saved us. The news of the stone man saving Eric and Lily from the copper-skinned giant bear quickly spread. The rumor of the wizard, which had only been quiet for a few days, once again became a hot topic of discussion. As a result, more and more people went to the forest in the suburbs, hoping to see the wizard and get their blessings. Nobles and knights who might have contact with wizards were, after all, a minority. For most people in this era, wizards were legendary existences. In the eyes of these ordinary humans, they were powerful existences no different from gods. To them, finding a wizard was like finding a god. This was the most basic form of worship in this era. A few days later, at Heath's lighthouse. At the lighthouse's entrance, Heath was welcoming the Onlun and Nona who had sent Lily to class. After the incident in the forest in the suburbs, Lily had rested at home. Although she was not injured at the time, she was still quite frightened and had adjusted her state of mind at home for a few days. Heath asked, "Don't you plan to rest for another 2 days? These 2 days of classes are not that important. There's no need to return to class so soon." The Onluns could not help but look hesitant. But before they could speak, Lily shook her head and said, "No need, teacher. I'm already very well." Heath bent down and rubbed Lily's pink little face. He teased, "Little girl, you're really brave. You're usually so obedient. I didn't expect you to either not make a move or make big news the moment you make a move." Lily blushed slightly. "I know I'm wrong." Heath observed and confirmed that there was nothing wrong with Lily's mental state. He nodded and said to the Onlun couple, "Leave her to me. I think she can come to class." The frown on Onlun's face relaxed. "Then I'll have to trouble Mr. Heath." The couple left quickly. Heath then led Lily back to the classroom to prepare for today's lesson. Seeing Lily enter, the children in the classroom were obviously a little excited. They ignored the classroom discipline and started to ask Lily all sorts of questions. "Wow, Lily, it's Lily. Lily is back. Lily, is it true? It's rumored that you met a wizard in the forest. Is that true? Is it a real wizard? It is said that he recruited a giant to help you chase away the giant bear. Is that true? Quick, tell us about it." Heath knocked on the blackboard and raised his eyebrows. "Quiet. It is class time now. Do you all want to be punished?" A child said, "Please, teacher, that is a wizard. Aren't you interested?" Heath said, "This is my classroom." After that day, Heath was secretly given a nickname by this group of apprentices. It was called Arrogant Heath. The reason was that everyone in the world was paying attention to the topic of wizards and discussing everything about wizards, but he did not show any interest in it at all. He even had a very casual tone when he mentioned the attitude of wizards. It was as if he did not take the wizards seriously at all. Is teacher cursed by the wizards? He offended the wizards like this. Some of the apprentices were even worried about Heath. Back to the classroom. Under the strict requirements of Heath, everyone could only calm down. The classroom quickly returned to its previous discipline, and Heath began to lecture. "Lily, get up and answer. What is the name of the area east of the Gold Coast?" Heath said to Lily, who was sitting below the classroom. Lily, who was sitting by the window, seemed not to have heard Heath's name call. She held her chin absent-mindedly and tilted her forehead toward the window. Heath's voice became louder. "Lily." "Ah." Lily finally came back to her senses and quickly stood up. "Teacher." Heath put down his book and looked out of the window in the direction where Lily had been staring at it. He asked in puzzlement, "Is there anything strange over there?" Lily shook her head and said, "No, nothing." Heath frowned. "What happened? You have always been the most obedient child in my class, but now you are constantly absent-minded." From the beginning of the class, Heath noticed that Lily was not in a good mood, and she kept looking out of the window from time to time. Lily blushed slightly. "I'm sorry, teacher." Heath was about to continue his lecture, but at that moment, there was a loud knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. The window on the side was open, just facing the door. A dirty little boy was standing outside the fence. It was Eric, the one who had come to cause trouble in Heath's classroom. "It's Eric. Oh my god, what is he doing here again?" Hasn't he had enough? It's better not to provoke him. I heard that he has been getting involved with the group of people with red scarves recently. The silence in the classroom was broken again, and the children began to discuss. Heath glanced at Lily, only to see that she was calm, and there seemed to be some joy on her face. He could not help but ask, "So that's the reason why you're absent-minded?" Lily stuck out her tongue playfully. "Teacher, didn't you ask me to bring him to class last time? I was just following your instructions. You're the smart one." Heath walked out, and the children followed him. When they arrived at the door, Eric was standing there with a disdainful look on his face, looking like a hooligan. Before Heath could speak, the children next to him questioned him with hostility. "Eric! What are you doing here?" Eric said, "Isn't there a free class here? Why can't I come?" A burly boy immediately stood up and said fiercely, "Hooligans like you are not welcome here. Get as far away from me as possible before I lose my temper." This was Alba, the strongest student among Heath's students. His father was also a helper who worked hard at the dock. Alba, who was born at the bottom, was very concerned about this hard-won opportunity to learn knowledge. Therefore, he respected Heath, the teacher who taught them for free. The last time Eric came to the classroom to throw stones, he was not in class because he had something to do. When he found out about this, he was very angry. He heard that he had gone to look for Eric in private, but he could not find him. Eric snorted. "Humph, Alba, you good for nothing, do you want to fight?" Alba was furious. He rolled up his sleeves and rushed forward. "You damn hooligan, you really lack a lesson." Lily, who was beside him, quickly stopped him. "Alba, what are you doing? I called Eric here." Alba was stunned. He was very puzzled. "Why did you call him here?" The other children also had looks of disbelief on their faces. Although everyone knew that Eric was also in the outer forest when Lily had her accident not long ago, they did not know that Eric had saved Lily. They only knew that Eric saw a giant summoned by a wizard. After all, how could a child be of any use to a giant creature like the copper-skinned giant bear? Lily said, Because after a long time, she still could not give a reason. It was not a glorious thing to let a little rascal save her. Eric's face stiffened. "Okay." At this moment, Heath walked out. He looked at Eric outside. "Your name is Eric, right?" Eric still wanted to show off his personality, but for some reason, after hearing Heath's voice, a feeling of not daring to resist arose in the depths of his heart. After trying for a long time, he could only say, "Yes, so what?" Heath continued to ask, "Are you here to learn?" Eric snorted. "Can't I?" Heath said, "In that case, come in with me." Eric was stunned. In fact, after seeing Lily's hesitation, he was already prepared to leave. But for some reason, after hearing Heath's words, he became interested in this place again. It was as if there was a voice in his ear continuously ordering him to go in. After a moment's hesitation, Eric pushed the door open and walked into the yard. Chapter 277, New Student. The class continued until the end. After class. "Teacher Heath, I'll take my leave first." "Goodbye, teacher." The students left one after another. Alba walked in front of Heath shyly. Heath raised his eyebrows and asked, "What's the matter, Alba?" Alba hesitated for a moment and said, "Teacher, I don't understand. Why did you ask Eric to come here? The classroom is a sacred place, and that hooligan." Heath was stunned. He had not expected the students to have such strong resistance. His gaze swept past the few apprentices who had not left yet. He saw that everyone had their ears perked up as if they were waiting for Heath's reply. Obviously, Alba was not the only one who had doubts about this. Heath said, "There's nothing to explain. I'm a teacher. It's natural for me to teach. All right, let's go back quickly." Everyone looked at each other. Alba said a little unwillingly, "Yes." Heath originally thought that the matter had passed just like that. It was just that there was one more student. However, he did not expect that there would be a lot of trouble surrounding this student union in the next few days. First, there were two students who did not continue to come to class the next morning. Although on the surface they said that there was something going on at home, according to Heath's private understanding, it was actually because of Eric that the adults in the family were worried. Why did a child cause so many people to hate him? After Heath understood more about it, he knew that apart from being a troublemaker, Eric was often mixed up with the Red Scarves at the pier. It was an underground gang in Golden Harbor Town, it was basically notorious here. After that, some parents of the students even came directly to the door and begged Heath to let Eric leave the class. Eric was not very firm when he came to the classroom. After the students and their parents made a scene, he felt isolated and decided to back out. However, just as he was about to leave, Heath stood up. He patiently explained to the parents of the students who came to him, knowledge is part of the value. The parents were still trying to persuade him, Teacher Heath, we are just worried that you will get into trouble. Believe us, that is not a good child. He will bring trouble. He kept saying those few sentences to get Heath to chase Eric away. After listening to so much, Heath could not help but feel a little impatient. This is my classroom. Who should I teach? Whether I teach or not, it is up to me. Don't say anything. Living here as a scholar was just a way for him to experience life. Whether he taught or not depended on his own personal preferences. As for the identity and background of the students, good and evil, and so on, it was meaningless to him. This. All right then. Having said that, no matter how unwilling the parents were, they could only keep their mouths shut. If they were really dissatisfied, they could only bring their children back home. However, in reality, the number of people who did so could be counted on one hand. To be exact, there were no such people. After all, this was a rare opportunity to receive an education. To them, who had been at the bottom of the hierarchy for generations, it was no different from gold that had fallen from the sky. Even the two children who had gone home just now returned to class a few days later. After that, Eric went to look for Heath in private. He said to Heath in a very adult-like tone, actually, you don't have to do this. I came here only because I agreed to someone else's request. I simply. He paused for a moment and snorted. I don't care. If those people come to complain again, I'll leave tomorrow. There's no need for you to stand up for me. Anyway, when I become a knight, those people who look down on me will all kneel at my feet and lick my boots. Humph. Heath rolled up the scroll and knocked on his head. To be polite in front of the teacher, you must first use the polite honorific of you and not the impolite you. Eric was startled and asked with some doubt, aren't you afraid of me? I'll bring trouble to you. Heath knocked on his head again. I've said it a few times, use honorifics. Don't talk to me again until you've learned this. Besides, trouble isn't something a child should consider. Have a good lesson. After a few days of getting familiar with it, Eric came to find Heath in private and explained it again. It's fake. Heath asked, what? Eric said, the rumors about me. I'm not like that. I'm not a person with the red scarves, and I've never joined them. The one who joined them was a friend of mine, not me. We did hang out together in the past, but after he joined the red scarves, we stopped contacting each other. I'm someone who wants to become a knight, I'm not a villain. Heath said, oh. Eric felt that it was very strange. Most people would tremble when they heard about the red scarves, and everyone even hated him because of it. But this teacher seemed to have never cared about it. He could not help but ask, aren't you afraid? Heath smiled. You finally learned how to use honorifics. Eric's face turned slightly red. Heath continued to answer, I remember that I've already answered your question last time. Focus on your studies. The rest is not something a child like you should consider. Eric was startled. Although he didn't know why his teacher's courage came from, Eric really liked this place. There were many children his age, everyone was focused on learning instead of fighting. There was a lot of knowledge to be learned, and even many stories about wizards. In short, after staying for a few days, Eric really felt that this was a place he liked. He nodded heavily. I will. As time passed, everyone gradually accepted Eric as a member of this class. In fact, in the past, people didn't like him more because of his mischievous behavior and the bad reputation he had with the red scarves. But after getting along with him, people gradually realized that this bad boy wasn't as annoying as they thought. He didn't bully other children, nor did he block someone at the door and beat them up. He also attended classes like ordinary children and listened to the teacher attentively. He also liked to listen to the legends of wizards just like them. Therefore, after getting along with each other for a period of time, everyone gradually accepted Eric. In the past, no one paid attention to him. Now, there were gradually children who would invite him to play with them and so on. Everything seemed to be developing in a good direction. However, at this time, Eric, who was the first in class every day, suddenly skipped class. Chapter 278, Hooligan. That morning, when Heath came to the classroom, the other students were already in the classroom, but there was no sign of Eric. He asked, "Where's Eric? Is he still not here?" The students looked at each other and shook their heads. "He's not here. I don't see him. I'm not sure." Ever since he officially started classes at Heath's classroom, Eric was basically the first to arrive at the classroom every day. Naturally, Heath felt a little strange that there was no sign of him now. Something must have happened. Although it was strange, it was still a small matter, so Heath did not take it to heart. However, he did not expect that something would happen in the afternoon. In the afternoon, while Heath was meditating in the tower, there was a series of awkward knocks on the door, accompanied by Lily's anxious shouts. "Knock, knock, knock. Teacher Heath, Teacher Heath." Heath teleported downstairs and opened the door. Lily and the other children were standing outside the door. They were having a good time with Eric in class. Heath asked, "What happened?" Lily pulled on Heath's shirt and said anxiously, Eric was beaten." "Teacher Heath, can you help him?" Heath was stunned. "Beaten up? It was the Red Scarves people. It was the Red Scarves people who did it." Eric didn't want to play with them anymore. They didn't agree, so he stopped Eric. From the children, Heath roughly understood the whole story. It was mainly related to the infamous Red Scarves. Although Eric didn't join the Red Scarves, he did hang out with one of the Red Scarves people before this. One of his friends was even part of the Red Scarves. The Red Scarves people had been trying their best to rope him in. After a long period of preparation, Eric had been persuaded by the Red Scarves and was ready to join. But at this time, Eric came to Heath's class. Although the knowledge taught in Heath's class didn't bring much philosophy to him, the environment he created, living with ordinary children like Lily for a long time, it was still very different from an underground organization like the Red Scarves. Normal people would not think about it. Eric had been hesitant about the invitation from the Red Scarves. After spending time with ordinary children, he decisively cut himself off from the Red Scarves and rejected the invitation. In order to win Eric over, the Red Scarves had spent a lot of time before this. Now that he had changed his mind at the last minute, of course they would not let it go. Therefore, they immediately put away their hypocrisy and captured Eric. They wanted Eric to steal something, but Eric refused, so they arrested Eric. They are now at the old tavern at the dock. The children did not have a sound crisis management plan. When they encountered such a situation, the first thing they thought of was their parents and their teacher. And subconsciously, they felt that in helping Eric, compared to their parents, Heath was a more reliable teacher. Heath did not disappoint them. "Lead the way, I'll go take a look." With the children leading the way, the group arrived at the pier. Beside the pier, there was a low and densely built area. The houses looked dilapidated and very old, and the roads were mostly very narrow. It was also covered with dirt. This was the lower part of Golden Harbor Town, a slum. The people who lived here were mostly prostitutes, thieves, hoodlums, and other people from the lowest class of society. It was the most chaotic and dirty area in the entire Golden Harbor Town. "Teacher, that's the place. That's the old tavern. The Red Scarves people are all there. That's where they caught Eric." Heath followed the children to a small alley hidden deep in the street. The alley was dark and narrow, and on both sides of the alley were many small beggars dressed in shabby clothes. There were many other alleys like this one, and they were all called Beggars' Alley. Those who lived here were small beggars without parents, homeless, and begging for a living. Most of them were controlled by gangs, the Red Scarves was one of them. The arrival of Heath and the others quickly attracted the attention of these small beggars. Some of them quickly ran to the end of the alley. At the end of the alley was a shabby old house. When they got closer, they could vaguely hear a sound coming from inside. That was a man's shout, accompanied by the sound of a whip whipping. "Damn kid, if you refuse a toast, you'll be forced to drink a forfeit. You refuse to listen to good advice, and you insist on getting whipped. You ate our food and drank our wine, and now you're just going to leave? Do you think that's possible?" The door of the old house was open, and there were a few little beggars standing at the door, but they did not stop them. Heath led the children into the house easily. It was a dilapidated old house. There were more than a dozen little beggars gathered in the house. And here, Heath also saw Eric, who had disappeared. His hands and feet were tied, and he was tied from the beam in the house. His clothes had been removed, and his entire body was covered with bloodstains left by the whips. A middle-aged man stood in front of Eric, holding a pair of whips in his hands. He was whipping Eric viciously. The children had never seen such a scene before, and they were all greatly frightened. "Oh! My God! Eric!" Their exclamations quickly attracted the attention of the middle-aged man. He was first stunned, then looked at Heath suspiciously and said, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" The clothes on Heath's body and the aura on his body did not seem like ordinary people, so he did not dare to offend him easily. Heath pointed at Eric and went straight to the point. "That's my student." The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment, but he quickly came to a realization. He praised him and pointed his whip at Heath. He said while spitting, "Good, so you're the one who doesn't know life from death? You dare to come to Golden Harbor Town and behave atrociously just because you know two lousy words? You even dare to touch my people. I didn't find you to settle the score, yet you still dare to come to my doorstep." Heath said nonchalantly, "Then how do you want to settle the score?" The middle-aged man who had been fooling around was not polite at all. He cursed angrily, "I'll count as your mother." As he said that, he raised his whip and lashed it directly at Heath. Seeing that, Heath did not stand on ceremony. He stretched out his hand and grabbed at the middle-aged man's wrist. The speed of a mortal was basically no different from slow motion in his eyes. The middle-aged man's wrist was easily grabbed by him. Grabbing his wrist, he then exerted a little strength into it. Immediately, a caw sound was heard, and the middle-aged man's wrist directly caved in. "Ah!" The middle-aged man who was hit by this heavy blow screamed in pain. His face instantly turned pale, and his originally arrogant and despotic attitude was completely gone. Heath then twisted his body and kicked out again, directly sending the middle-aged man flying and smashing his head heavily into the opposite wall, causing the middle-aged man's head to bleed. "Any questions?" he asked. Chapter 279, Calm Down. The middle-aged man who was kicked away slammed heavily into the wall and fell to the ground. His face was as red as a pig's liver as he kneeled on the ground and could not get up. "Any other questions?" a frivolous voice sounded. Heath asked as if nothing had happened. The middle-aged man seemed to want to say something. He tried to move his mouth a few times and finally opened it. However, there was a wah sound and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His head tilted and he fell to the side. It was obvious that he had passed out. He really can't take a beating. With a disappointed look on his face, Heath waved his hands and said to the children beside him, "Go and untie Eric." "Ah! Oh! Everything happened too suddenly." Whether it was the children who followed Heath or the little beggars in the room, they were all stunned. No one had expected that the seemingly ordinary Heath would be able to put down a brawny hooligan in an instant, and even knock him unconscious. At this moment, hearing Heath's words, the children finally recovered from their shock. "Yes, yes, yes, teacher." They hurried forward, quickly untied the rope on Eric's body, and put him down from the beam. At this moment, Eric was covered in blood and his skin was torn. After being rescued, he immediately trembled and said to Heath, "Teacher! Teacher!" Heath waved his hand. "Let's talk when we get back." The next day, Heath's lighthouse, classroom. Heath was teaching the children as usual. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. Eric appeared at the door of the classroom. At this moment, Eric was wearing a clean robe. The wounds on his body had also been treated. Although he still looked very disheveled, he was clearly much better than before. "Teacher," standing at the door of the classroom, Eric spoke with a trembling voice. His voice was a little timid. He lowered his head and did not dare to look into Heath's eyes. Heath asked, "How is it? Are you better?" Eric said, "I'm much better. Thank you, teacher, for your herbs." After returning yesterday, Heath saw that Eric's injuries were not light, so he gave him some herbs to treat his injuries. Although these were not magic substances, they were used to have a certain recovery effect. Heath said, "You're welcome. All right, since you're here, come in." The class continued until the end. After class, Eric came in front of Heath. He looked very sad. "About what happened before?" "I'm sorry, teacher." Heath shook his head and smiled. It's not your fault. There's no need to apologize for it. Later on, Heath understood the whole story in more detail. The Red Scarves had been eyeing Eric for a long time. They had asked Eric to be their pickpocket, but Eric didn't agree. That was why they had hung him up and beaten him up. As for the reason why he had come to his class, it was only because he didn't want to go along with them. Heath said, "It's already very rare to be able to stand up for yourself in front of the strong." Heath's words warmed Eric's heart. If he had come to the classroom only because he thought it was fun previously, then now he had more respect for Heath. He looked at Heath curiously and asked, "Teacher. That?" He stuttered as if he had something to say. Heath said, "What?" Eric thought for a moment and suddenly asked with bright eyes, "I want to know, teacher, are you a knight? You can easily defeat Sam. You must be a knight, right?" Heath didn't answer directly, but said, "I did receive knight training before." He only wanted to live in this city as an ordinary person, and knights were people of a higher level. Although he did not receive Heath's recognition, this answer still made Eric's eyes light up. Knight training was something that only the noble class could come into contact with. Without thinking, he asked with a dry mouth, "Teacher, then, can you teach me? Can you teach me?" The common class did not have any concept of etiquette, so Eric did not realize that this was a very rude thing to do. However, Heath did not care. Instead, he smiled readily. Sure. Heath had originally thought that the gang of hoodlums with red headscarves would retaliate against him, a village teacher. However, such a thing did not happen. After waiting for a few days, no one came looking for him. It was probably because the kick was too heavy. One kick could break a few ribs of a person. The other party should have realized that a person like him was definitely not someone to be trifled with. The gang of hooligans with red scarves was just a small gang of hooligans. This made Heath a little disappointed. A normal life was always lacking some fun. He had originally hoped that these hooligans would come knocking on his door to find some fun for him to kill some boring time, but it was a pity. Next time there's such an opportunity, should I restrain myself a little and give others a chance? Heath even began to think about it. Perhaps it was because the extension of his lifeline allowed him to have plenty of time, so he did not have to care about the loss of time. Heath also began to look forward to such boring things that he would only see as a waste of time in the past. He was not an exception. Most wizards were like this. Training and meditation were very boring. After a long time, wizards would feel suppressed and accumulate a large number of negative emotions. Sometimes, they would even doubt themselves and doubt the meaning of life. They would feel lost in training and lose themselves on the path of wizards. There were even many wizards who went crazy because of this, and even ended up committing suicide. Therefore, many wizards would regularly do things that were not related to their training to release their negative emotions, such as going out on treasure hunts, indulging in women, and other sensory substances, and like Heath, they would experience life as an ordinary person. Through contact and experience of these things, wizards could remember the meaning of life, see the beauty of the world, and be more determined to walk the path of wizards, towards the truth and eternity. In short, the matter passed just like that. After being taught a lesson by the Red Scarves, Eric asked for help from Heath, and the Red Scarves no longer came to find trouble with Eric. The next day, Heath also set up a knight training course in his own classroom, teaching some basic knight skills, including basic swordsmanship, fighting skills, and so on. In fact, such a course was not a special secret in the mortal world. There were people teaching it in every town, and many of them were even retired apprentice knights. However, it was impossible to become a knight based on this. It was purely to let ordinary people know some fighting skills. On the other side, Heath was leisurely teaching children as a scholar and teacher in Golden Harbor Town. Time passed slowly in such a peaceful day. However, to Heath's surprise, a few days later, a group of uninvited guests broke his peace. Chapter 280, Later. 2 months later, in the meditation room of Heath's lighthouse. Zi. Zi. The white candle was burning with a sizzling sound. Under the pulsating flame, the colorful elemental light scattered into the air like burning spices. Then, it was blocked by an invisible barrier and eventually filled the entire room. A layer of colorful fog filled the room. In the middle of the room was an ancient magic array made of bright red beast blood, candles, and various materials. The slightly pungent smell of blood and the strange smell of magic materials mixed together filled the air. In the magic array, Heath was sitting cross-legged. His eyes were slightly closed and he was meditating. Huff! Huff! A faint sound echoed in the room. The elemental particles around the sound rushed towards Heath, as if there was some kind of strong attraction. These colorful elemental particles climbed up his nose, mouth, torso, and even his skin like little insects, and then slowly seeped into his body. At the same time, the system's notification sound continued to ring in Heath's ears. Beep! Elemental extraction successful. Spiritual power increased. Beep! Elemental extraction successful. Spiritual power increased. It lasted for about 2 hours before Heath finally ended this round of meditation. Phew! Heath heaved a sigh of relief. He pinched the bridge of his nose and opened his eyes. He then said, System. Beep. Reporting data. Beep, Strength 62.3, Agility 78.8, Vitality 58.6, Spiritual Power 200.1. Spiritual Force 200.1. After seeing the last attribute of spiritual power, Heath could not help but reveal a look of joy. After a wizard's spiritual power exceeded 200 points, it meant that the wizard had entered the beginner late stage. And now, Heath was already a veritable beginner late stage wizard. The only thing left in front of him was to reach the peak and enter the intermediate stage. I've finally reached the late stage. After calculating the time, it had been more than 10 years since he had advanced to become a wizard. In these 10 years, Heath had basically never slacked off, maintaining his normal training frequency every day. After more than 10 years of hard training, in addition to the large amount of support provided by the system, he had barely reached the late stage. From this, one could see how difficult it was for a wizard to reach the late stage. The path of the wizard was like this. The further one progressed, the more difficult it became. Next is the purple coral. Thinking of this, Heath couldn't help but frown. There were no problems with his mental strength and his soul's mutation had already reached the standard. He could reach the peak level step by step. What he lacked now was purple coral. It seems like I have to hurry, but where should I go to find it? Purple coral was a magic material that grew randomly. It could appear in many places in the ocean, but its growth rate was too low. Shipwreck Bay was an example. He searched the entire Shipwreck Bay, but could not find it. One had to know that Shipwreck Bay was one of the places with high elemental content in this sea. Let's find an opportunity to get in touch with the wizard organization here. It was too difficult to find purple corals in the vast sea by himself. Heath thought it was best to contact the wizard organization in this area and see if he could get his hands on them. I'll go to the Sea Crown to visit Kirst in 2 days. With this decision, Heath put away the messy thoughts in his mind, blew out the elemental candle beside him, and left the meditation room. After leaving the meditation room, it was the laboratory. At this moment, Nina was busy working in front of the experiment table. She was wearing a brown wizard robe and a pair of black-rimmed glasses on the bridge of her nose. She looked like a refined scholar. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Ding. Ding. Dong. The boiling water in the black pot on the table was emitting thick smoke. Frog legs, lizard tails, eyeballs, and all kinds of materials were rolling inside. The sound of glass tubes colliding echoed. Nina was reading a magic book while adding all kinds of materials. Blue-tailed grass, heart of red striped fish. Tinkle flower. Heath walked over to take a look and couldn't help but frown. The dosage of tinkle flower isn't right, is it? Wow! Nina seemed to have been startled by Heath's sudden arrival. The materials in her hands shook and fell into the black pot. Immediately, the boiling water in the black pot emitted a dazzling light, and a powerful elemental fluctuation instantly swept out. Seeing this scene, Nina's brows tightened. Shit! Shit! As soon as she finished speaking, there was a boom, and a deafening explosion. The entire black pot exploded, and the violent energy fluctuation was like a violent bomb exploding in the room. Thick smoke billowed into the sky, and for a moment, only the crisp sound of ding, ding, dong, could be heard. The entire laboratory was destroyed in an instant. After a while, crash! The mimicry shield that was like mercury was slowly put away, and the glass shards that were stuck on it gradually fell to the ground. Heath raised his hand to fan the thick smoke in front of him, and looked forward. He saw that the laboratory that had been orderly a moment ago had been completely turned into ruins. The wooden shelves, wooden tables, and other facilities had been blasted into pieces, and the test tubes placed on them were scattered all over the ground. In the ruins, Nina looked at everything in a daze. A moment later, What are you doing? A furious voice sounded. Nina yelled at Heath angrily, it took me a lot of effort to make it to this stage. Although the elemental explosion did not cause her any harm because of her spirit body, her vertical eyebrows and heaving chest still showed that she was dissatisfied with the failure of the preparation of the potion. Cough. Heath coughed lightly. He did not think that the failure was his fault at all. He said calmly, there was something wrong with the dosage of the tinkle flower just now. Even if you continue to concoct it, it will not succeed. As he spoke, he snapped his fingers lightly. The magic arrays around the laboratory lit up in unison. The messy ground also began to be cleaned up. The pieces of wood that had been blown away flew back from all directions and were then pieced back together to form tables, chairs, cabinets, and so on. The glass test tubes that were scattered around with materials or potions also flew back into the cabinets. These glass test tubes had been strengthened by magic. Even such an explosion could be easily withstood without being easily damaged. Soon, the lab, which had been a mess just moments ago, was restored to its original state. Chapter 281, Guest. Every activity in the field of magic was extremely dangerous. It was always accompanied by all kinds of failures, whether it was concocting potions or magic experiments, any small mistake could cause the destructive damage caused by the explosion. This was something that no wizard, no matter how skilled, could avoid. And because of this, no wizard would forget to cast a corresponding defensive spell on their laboratory. Heath was no exception. He had set up a soundproof and defensive barrier on the outside of the laboratory. No matter how violent the explosion was, it would not affect the outside. It could even withstand the damage of a high-level wizard. In addition, he had cast a restoration spell on the facilities inside. This was a small-scale time reversal spell, which could restore the material structure to a certain period of time. After every explosion, Heath would only need to activate the magic array on top to restore the facilities inside to their original state. Nina rolled her eyes and said unwillingly, "Come on, what does it matter if you put 1 or 2 tinkle flowers in the wrong place? Even if there is a slight mistake, it won't be completely destroyed." Heath shook his head. Errors are not allowed in potions. Any slight change in the composition will directly affect the results of the potions. As he spoke, he walked over to the magic book that had fallen to the ground. He dusted it off and placed it on the table. Then, he picked up the test tube on the glass shelf next to him. The test tube was filled with azure potions. These were all potions that Nina had concocted previously. With the recovery of her soul power, Nina was able to maintain her corporeal form for a long time. Moreover, she did not need to sleep for a long time every day. Since she had nothing to do anyway, Heath simply handed over some low-level potions and materials needed for training to Nina, allowing her to refine and process them. Wizards would use a large number of low-level potions and materials for training. These things were not complicated, but it would take a lot of time to prepare. Many wizards would recruit apprentices for this reason. The purity of these deep-level mind potions is not bad. Not bad, not bad. There is indeed progress. Nina, who was praised, immediately smiled. "Oh, are you praising me? It's rare for a strict guy like you to praise others." Heath said, "Being strict is a character that every wizard should have, okay?" Nina rolled her eyes. "That's not being strict anymore, okay? You're totally a pervert." Heath's pursuit of magic potions was always based on a high standard, and he would not accept even a 0.01 error. This made Nina, who had just started to help Heath to make magic potions, suffer a lot. Seeing many potions that were painstakingly made being thrown away by Heath because of a small flaw made her crazy. The two of them had more than one dispute over this. Heath smiled and said, "This is good for you, isn't it?" Nina snorted. "Are you trying to say that the horse under the whip always runs faster?" Although that was the case, Nina knew that Heath was right. Although she had suffered a lot because of Heath's harsh requirements, her knowledge of these basic experiments and basic potions had also improved a lot recently. Heath did not continue on this topic. He continued, "Recently, we have been preparing more basic potions. In a few days, we might have to go out to sea. It will be difficult to get these things on the ship." When she heard Heath mention going out to sea, Nina immediately became spirited. Her eyes lit up and she said, "Going out to sea? Great!" As she said that, she flew around Heath. At the same time, she transformed into the long-sleeved shirt and captain's hat that she wore on the ship. This time, there was an eye patch on her eye and a western sword in her hand. She waved the western sword and said, "Roar! Roar! Go to the sea! Go to the sea! Raise the sails, ride the wind and break the waves, sweep away the pirates and sea monsters, and search for the buried treasure at the bottom of the sea." "That's great! I'm almost moldy here. When are we going? When are we going?" Nina flew up happily. The corner of Heath's mouth twitched. God knows where this spirit had such a great sense of adventure. She had become a spirit after dying from an adventure, yet she was still so active. Heath said, "Well, I..." As he said this, he seemed to suddenly feel something, but his voice suddenly stopped. Heath frowned and looked in a direction. After entering the late stage of the wizard realm, Heath's soul sensitivity had increased by a large margin. Just now, he clearly felt two strange spiritual forces approaching from there. "Someone's coming." She was a little slower than Heath, but Nina still quickly sensed the abnormality. Heath nodded. "Let's go and meet our guests." At the same time, below the tower, two figures appeared at the entrance of Heath's lighthouse. They were a man and a woman. They looked very young, in their 20s. They wore a uniform blue cloak with a wavy crest embroidered on the sleeve of the cloak. Together, they formed a composition of a hickey. "Deep sea kiss?" the woman asked. "Jackman, are you sure that the intruder lives here?" As she spoke, she looked up at the lighthouse. The ancient stone walls were covered with mottled nettles, and the stone slabs were cracked with fine lines. It looked very dilapidated. Even some human nobles would not be interested in such a residence. Jackman said, "The return from the fish will not be a problem. He has been living here ever since he came back from the sea." After a pause, he added, "Besides, Alice, as a wizard, you can't just observe things on the surface." He narrowed his eyes and looked at the lighthouse. It looked like an ordinary tower, but after scanning it with his spiritual power, he was surprised to find that his spiritual power could not penetrate it. This discovery surprised him. As a peak-level wizard, Jackman was only one step away from being an intermediate-level wizard. His soul mutation was not up to the standard yet. However, with his spiritual power, he was blocked by this seemingly ordinary lighthouse. It was unbelievable. Why can't my spiritual power penetrate it? At this moment, Alice also found out about this. Jackman narrowed his eyes. It seems that this strange friend is not an ordinary wizard. While the two were surprised, a series of footsteps suddenly came from the door. "Da-da-da!" Jackman said, "It seems that this friend has already sensed that we are coming." Click! Just as he finished speaking, a soft sound was heard as the closed door opened. A girl wearing a red dress appeared at the door of the room. That translucent body indicated her identity. Jackman and Alice were slightly shocked. They said in unison, "Spirit." Chapter 282, Visit. Although wizards kept all kinds of strange companions, such as lizards, toads, owls, black cats, bats, and grey mice, it was still rare to see spirits as companions. Alice tugged on Jackman's clothes and whispered, "Jackman, this spirit can materialize." Jackman was stunned. Materialization was something that could only be done by a spirit formed from the soul of a wizard or above. In other words, the spirit in front of him must have been an official wizard when she was alive. If the spirit pet beside him could be at the wizard level, then what about the wizard's own strength? Both of their eyes became more serious. At the same time, Nina glanced at the two of them and said indifferently, "Hey, you two, what's the matter?" Jackman and Nina looked at each other. In fact, the purpose of their trip was to investigate the theft of materials from Shipwreck Bay. Through their investigation, the culprit behind the massive destruction of Shipwreck Bay should be here. However, at this time, they could not help but hesitate. After all, a wizard who could possess the soul of an official wizard as a magic pet had already reached an unknown level of strength. With their strength alone, they did not know if they could verify it. Seeing that the two of them did not reply, Nina could not help but frown. She said with some dissatisfaction, "Hey, you two, what's the matter?" Jackman hesitated for a moment, thought for a moment, and decided to first understand, so he said, "Hello, miss, we are beginner wizards of Deep Sea Kiss. This is our badge." He took out a badge of Deep Sea Kiss and showed it to Nina. After a pause, Jackman continued, "We came here this time mainly to represent Deep Sea Kiss and visit the wizard who lives here. Also, there are some things we want to ask him for advice. May I know if His Excellency is here?" Nina replied with a straight face, no. She did not forget that they had just arrived here and had to make a mess of rules under the framework of the law of the wizard world. The one who had made things difficult for them was the deep-sea kiss. Hearing this, Alice's temper flared up. She raised her eyebrows and said, "Are you joking with us? If so, then this joke is not funny at all." After a pause, she said in a slightly cold voice, "I'm warning you, this is the resource area of our deep-sea kiss. No matter where you come from, if you want to move here, you have to obtain the consent of our deep-sea kiss." Nina snorted lightly and said disdainfully, "Humph, I really don't know where such a big temper comes from a mere third-rate wizard organization." Alice was furious. "You." Seeing that the two were about to argue, Jackman quickly went up to stop them. At the same time, a voice came from the tower. "Okay, Nina, let them come up." The argument at the door was temporarily stopped. Nina said with a straight face, "Count yourself lucky. My master wants you to go up." Then she flew away in a flash. Alice said indignantly, "Damn it, you dare to mess around on our territory and have such an arrogant attitude." Jackman comforted her, "Calm down, Alice. This is a human gathering place and not a resource area. They are not engaged in illegal collection activities. According to the wizard convention, all wizards, including grey wizards, who have legal status, can live here." Alice asked, "Doesn't Shipwreck Bay count?" Jackman said seriously, "That's still under investigation. We can't be sure that they did it." Alice said, "Humph, who else could it be?" Jackman shook his head and sighed, "In short, before the matter is completely settled, it's better for us to be cautious. Okay, let's go." The two of them walked into Heath's lighthouse. After the lighthouse was taken over by Heath, it had been renovated by him. The interior parts had been completely dismantled and redecorated to form a classroom. The upper part had also been completely dismantled. The top floor of the lighthouse was still preserved, which was Heath's laboratory. A wooden staircase had been built along the inner wall at the side, spiraling all the way up to the highest floor. It seemed to be the only way up. "This feeling is..." Jackman narrowed his eyes and looked around. After entering, he quickly felt an unusual spatial fluctuation. He said in surprise, "Spatial magic." Among all the magic disciplines, spatial magic could be considered as a relatively profound knowledge of magic. For a moment, Jackman could not help but become more interested in this wizard who came here. The two of them then walked up the stairs. The seemingly ordinary stairs seemed to come to life as soon as the two of them stepped on it. They began to move forward in layers, just like flowing waves. In the process, the two of them also climbed the stairs and quickly went up the waves. The interior of the lighthouse was carefully decorated by Heath with magic. The stairs they were on now were a gadget that Heath had made using magic. He called it the wave stairs. With the help of the staircase, Jackman and Alice quickly arrived at the room on the top floor. The door was open, but Jackman stopped Alice, who was about to walk in, and knocked on the door politely. "Come in." A voice came from inside. Jackman and Alice walked in. There was a simple reception room outside, with a low coffee table in the middle and a few single sofas by the side. Heath was sitting on one of the sofas, and Nina was sitting on a table not far away with her legs crossed. Jackman and Alice came in. He stood up with a polite smile and said warmly, "Friends, welcome to my lighthouse. I'm Heath Noen. Nice to meet you." Seeing Heath's easygoing attitude, Jackman felt a little relieved. It did not matter if a wizard was powerful, as long as they were not eccentric and could communicate normally. He quickly returned the greeting. "It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. I'm Jackman Garcia, a beginner-level wizard from Deep Sea Kiss." After a pause, he tugged at Alice and gestured for her to give him the proper etiquette. However, Alice just stared at Heath in a daze, and did not have any reaction even after Jackman had greeted him for a long time. Jackman could only cough dryly and introduce him, "Ahem, this is my comrade, Alice Cassie. She is a little shy. I hope you will forgive her." Heath smiled and was about to reply. However, before he could speak, Alice suddenly said, "It's you. Oh boy, I remember now. You are the one who destroyed my guards at the border forest." Chapter 283, Pardon Me. Heath was stunned. He turned his head to look at the witch and immediately reacted. He didn't pay much attention to her until he checked her with his spiritual tentacles. He then noticed that the witch's spiritual power was exactly the same as the one he encountered when he first arrived at the border forest. At the same time, Alice quickly said to Jackman, "Jackman, this is the guy who destroyed the guards I put in the border forest." As she spoke, her gaze towards Heath became unfriendly. Alice had spent a lot of effort to set up the guard room in the forest. After being destroyed by Heath, she was unwilling to accept it. She had searched for Heath for a long time. She had searched through the wizards with the surrounding resources, but they still could not find him. Now they finally understood where this wizard who had disappeared into thin air had gone. It turned out that he had hidden in a human gathering place. No wonder they could not find him. Jackman coughed lightly and said, "Be reasonable, Alice. Don't forget why we are here." He had heard of the previous incident, but that incident was purely Alice's unreasonable cause. According to the wizard convention, they could not stop wizards from freely entering and leaving the Gold Coast. No matter where they took them, it would not make sense. After saying that, he gave Heath an awkward smile. "My colleague is a little impatient in handling things. I hope you don't mind." Heath shook his head. "No, let's sit down and talk. Nina, get some soul-washing water." After saying that, he invited the two to sit on the sofa and arranged for Nina to bring tea. The soul-washing water, which gave off a faint blue light, could give a wizard's spiritual power and soul a double cleansing. It was a wizard's favorite. Jackman drank the soul-washing water and nodded with a smile. "Very pure soul-washing water." "Thank you, sir." Heath said, "If you like it, bring some back later." Jackman smiled. "There's no need for that." After a brief exchange of pleasantries, Jackman cut to the point. "I came here today to disturb you, sir, mainly for two things." Heath said, "Please go ahead." "First, I want to register you. Although you can live here according to the wizard convention, according to the rules of our deep-sea kiss, any foreign wizards have to record here." Nina sneered and said in a sarcastic tone, "Your deep-sea kiss has so many rules." Jackman explained, "There are too many dark wizards nowadays. Their appearance will always bring disaster. We are also thinking for everyone." Heath nodded. "It's understandable. It was not a big deal. Living in their territory and letting them register at their door would not be a problem." After a pause, he continued, "What else is there?" Jackman hesitated for a moment, then took out a dimensional pocket from his sleeve and placed it on the coffee table. He asked, "I would like to ask if you know about this dimensional pocket." Heath picked up the dimensional pocket and looked at it. He replied with certainty, "This is my dimensional pocket. It was left behind when I went to Shipwreck Bay." This was what he had left behind when he left Shipwreck Bay because he had collected other people's materials. Hearing Heath's words, Alice, who was next to him, immediately cried out, her voice full of hostility, "It was really you." Heath frowned and said indifferently, "If you don't want to talk properly, get out of here." From the beginning, this witch had been aggressive again and again. He had not even settled the matter with her at the border forest last time, and she still dared to show off here. Alice stood up abruptly. "What did you say?" Heath raised his eyebrows. Since he had given her face, there was nothing he could do. He simply raised his right hand. Seeing his action, Jackman, who was next to him, suddenly changed his expression and hurriedly shouted, "Alice, be careful." As soon as he finished speaking, Alice suddenly felt an invisible and powerful force sweep over from all directions, enveloping her whole body. She hurriedly channeled her magic power to resist, but when she resisted, she was shocked to find that her magic power was as weak as a piece of white paper in front of this invisible force. In an instant, it crumbled and was torn into pieces like rotten wood. Zzz. At this moment, a cluster of green flames suddenly bloomed in the air. It seemed that Jackman, who was beside her, had made his move. He summoned a cluster of green flames and quickly expanded it in the room and swept it toward Alice. At the same time, he shouted at Heath, "Sir Heath, this is the territory of our deep-sea kiss. I'm afraid it's against the rules for you to do this." Heath said coldly, "I'm afraid it's too late to talk about the rules." After saying that, he no longer paid attention to Jackman. Instead, he raised his finger and gently drew a few times in the air, as if he was cutting sausages. Instantly, it was as if an invisible knife had appeared in Jackman's air. It cut the flames that Jackman had summoned into several pieces and sealed them in their respective independent spaces. Heath then clenched his right hand into it. The flames were instantly contracted and compressed, and then extinguished with a bang. Jackman was shocked. He quickly chanted another spell in an attempt to cast a spell, but before he could finish, an invisible force field enveloped him, preventing him from moving. The two official level wizards were all controlled by Heath in an instant. At this moment, he had already entered the late stage of a beginner wizard. In addition, he had also set up many runes and magic arrays in this tower to assist in casting spells. With the power of these runes and magic, even an intermediate level wizard could be contended against. How could these two small beginner wizards be able to resist? Alice, who was controlled, still did not forget to shout, "You damned fellow, what do you want to do? This is the territory of my deep-sea kiss. You can't do whatever you want here. I swear, our deep-sea kiss." Heath glanced at her in annoyance. He reached out his hand from left to right and slid it in front of his mouth, making a zipper gesture. Woo-woo. Alice's original noise suddenly stopped, leaving only the sound of woo-woo. Heath finally whispered to her, "Toad, ribbit." As soon as he finished speaking, Alice's body began to twist and compress, as if her entire body had become a piece of plasticine, and there was a large invisible hand that was rubbing flat and pinching a circle at her. After a few moments, there was a bang, and a cloud of smoke rose from where Alice was. In the smoke, the original Alice was no longer there, but there was a small frog on the ground, croaking non-stop. Heath took an iron cage from the side, picked up the frog, and put it in. Then, with a snap of his fingers, he removed the restraints on Jackman. He handed the cage to Jackman. "Pardon me." Chapter 284, Investigation. Jackman took a deep look at Heath. Although he had already realized the strength of this wizard after coming here, Jackman still found that he had underestimated him. He was considered one of the top-ranked wizards among his peers in the Deep-Sea Kiss. Although Alice was relatively weaker, she was still a genuine official-level wizard. However, the two official-level wizards were easily taken down by this young wizard without any resistance. One of them was even cast a malicious shape-shifting spell. Such strength was really unexpected. Heath said, "I don't want anyone to disturb me when I'm talking. I hope you can understand my offense." It was an apology, but there was no apology at all. However, Jackman didn't dare to say anything in front of this absolute difference in strength. He just nodded and took the cage and put it on the table. Heath asked, "What did you say just now? You can repeat it." "Yes." Jackman nodded, then picked up the magic stone bag again and explained, "We found this magic stone bag in Shipwreck Bay." Heath said, "Yes, this is mine. Not long ago, I went to Shipwreck Bay for some materials needed for training, and collected them there. According to the wizard convention, this is my right." Jackman nodded, "Yes, but you should pay the corresponding amount." According to the wizard convention, wizards could go to other wizard organizations to collect materials in the wizard territory, but after the collection, they had to pay magic stones to the local guards according to the market price of the materials. After a pause, Jackman added, "And it's the market price of the corresponding materials." Heath was stunned. He finally understood what Jackman meant. Was it because I didn't give enough magic stones? This idea was immediately rejected by Heath. The magic stones he took out at that time were all according to the market price, and in order to avoid conflict, he deliberately increased the price by about 15%. There was no such thing as not matching. Then why did the other party come to find him? After a moment of silence, he said, "At that time, the forest keeper of Shipwreck Bay was not there, so I just left the magic stone pocket where it was. If there is any problem with the number of magic stones that do not match, I think you should ask your forest keeper. If the price of the magic stones was not right, then there could only be one explanation, and that was that the other party's forest keeper had tampered with it. He was not there at that time, so it was very likely that the other party had embezzled from above." However, Jackman's reply in the next moment denied Heath's guess. Jackman smiled bitterly and said, "Even if it was to fill one's own pockets, there wouldn't be a forest keeper who would be crazy enough to disregard everything, right? The loss of tens of millions of property could be fooled by more than a dozen high-level magic stones." Heath was stunned. Tens of millions. Jackman's gaze paused on Heath for a moment, especially the gaze he was looking at him with. As if he had seen something, Jackman said, "It seems that your excellency is indeed not related to this matter." Heath frowned and asked, "What exactly are you talking about?" Why did he feel that the more he listened, the more confused he became? Jackman explained, "After your excellency left Shipwreck Bay, there was a large area of property damage in Shipwreck Bay. Not only some of the materials, but also the sea fish and marine species inside had disappeared without a trace. Heath suddenly understood. He said, I see, so you came here for this matter. Jackman nodded. According to our investigation, during this period, only Your Excellency entered Shipwreck Bay, and we also found Your Excellency's magic stone pocket there, so there are some necessary investigations. Please forgive me, Your Excellency. Heath nodded. I understand. Jackman asked, then, sir, can you recall if you encountered anything special during your time in Shipwreck Bay? In fact, before coming here, Jackman had thought that the disappearance of the marine species in Shipwreck Bay should not have anything to do with this wizard. The main reason was that the missing marine fish did not have much effect on a wizard's cultivation. If a wizard really took them away, he could only sell them. However, according to the source, the wizard did not do so. Heath explained, it's a siren. I saw a siren eating in Shipwreck Bay when I was collecting the sea creatures. Most of the sea creatures in Shipwreck Bay were eaten by the siren. Jackman seemed to have expected this answer. After receiving Heath's answer, his face turned cold. It's really those guys? Heath asked, it seems that you already have an answer to this. Jackman nodded and said, actually, before this, I had suspected that it was related to the sirens. After all, only they are the most familiar with our magic array arrangement. Moreover, only the siren's barrier can make so many fish disappear without leaving any clues. To be honest, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. It's just that we don't have any evidence, so those bastards from the sea folk race are getting more and more outrageous. Jackman said angrily. This was an area of the ocean, so it was inevitable to have dealings with the sea folk race. Although the Wizard Alliance established a wizard convention to divide the area of influence, there were often conflicts and things like that. After a pause, Jackman suddenly said, Wizard Heath, although the truth has been found out, I still need to ask you to follow me to Deep Sea Kiss to prove it. Please rest assured, as long as you didn't do it, the Big Conch of Deep Sea Kiss has a way to prove your innocence. Big Conch was a wizard tool of Deep Sea Kiss, belonging to the rule-type wizard tool. It could test the wizard's words according to the wizard's law of cause and effect, to test the authenticity of the words. To put it bluntly, it was a lie detector. However, this lie detector was built on magic with high precision. Basically, there were no mistakes. Jackman persuaded, this is good for all of us. After all, you don't want to bear the name of a thief, do you? In other people's territory, they went to other people's wizard resource territory to collect. Now that something had happened, although Jackman was not the instigator, it was reasonable for him to help with the investigation. However, there was no corresponding regulation in the wizard code. Whether or not to help was entirely up to the wizard's own will. So, should he help them? Originally, he had nothing to do, so it did not matter if he helped them testify. However, Heath suddenly had an idea. Wasn't this a good opportunity to borrow the local power to obtain purple coral? So, he didn't agree. Instead, he asked, I don't seem to have any obligation to help you, right? Chapter 285, Conditions. I don't think I have the obligation to help you, right? Seeing Heath's words, Jackman naturally understood what Heath meant, so he asked straightforwardly, what conditions do you want? Heath praised, straightforward. After a pause, he went straight to the point, since you are so straightforward, then I'll say it directly. I need a portion of purple coral. Purple coral. Jackman was stunned for a moment. Then, he seemed to have thought of something. He widened his eyes and asked, you're going to advance to an intermediate wizard. Purple coral was a very simple material. Its biggest use was to make sublimation water. It was impossible for wizards not to know what sublimation water was used for. Heath did not answer, but his attitude explained everything. Jackman exclaimed, no wonder my magic power could not resist even a little bit in front of you. I see, I see. In fact, Jackman was thinking too much. His own strength had also reached the late stage. The reason why he was defeated so quickly by Heath was mainly because Heath's magic contained a trace of the power of rules. The difference between a rule-type spell and an ordinary spell was incomparable. Of course, if Jackman knew that Heath had already comprehended a rule-type spell, he would probably be even more incredulous. After a pause, Jackman pondered for a moment and said, Purple coral, forgive me for being blunt, but your Excellency's appetite can't be too big, right? You should know that such a material is very precious even if it is placed in our deep sea kiss. In terms of value, it is probably not inferior to the material we lost this time. Although Jackman's words were an exaggeration, it was not an exaggeration. Purple coral itself was an extremely rare material. Not to mention tens of millions, it was still worth 7 or 8 million. More importantly, this material could not be bought on the market. All the major wizard organizations banned the sale of this material. Heath said, I have to bear a lot of risks in order to help you testify. It might even lead to the retaliation of the sea folk race. Isn't it too much to take a little reward? Jackman said, please rest assured about this. Regarding your identity, we will keep it a secret. We will not bring you any risk. Heath did not buy it. If that's the case, then everyone will say it. Jackman pondered for a moment. He also knew that it would not be easy to convince Heath to testify without giving him any benefits. However, this purple coral. He thought for a moment and said, it is indeed wrong to ask you to bear the risk for nothing, but this purple coral. I'm very sorry. Purple coral is also a very important material for our deep sea kiss. I'm afraid I can't agree to it. Heath frowned. He had wanted to use this opportunity to get the purple coral, but it seemed that it would not be so easy. So, at this moment, Jackman continued, but if you are willing, you can follow me to deep sea kiss. My teacher has the right to control the purple coral. As long as we obtain his consent, there will be no problem. Heath raised his eyebrows. So, your deep sea kiss does indeed have purple coral now. Jackman nodded. Although there aren't many of them, there are a few in the treasury. Heath felt relieved after getting a definite answer. In fact, he didn't expect to get the purple coral directly from Jackman. His main goal was to find out more from Jackman and get some clues about the purple coral. He did not expect things to go so smoothly. Deep Sea Kiss indeed had purple coral. It was enough for Heath to get the information. In that case, Alice and I will stay in the hotel in town for a week. The hotel is called the Redbeard Hotel. It is located on Pearl Avenue. If you agree, you can come to us directly. I hope you will consider it carefully. Goodbye. Jackman left with Alice, who had been turned into a toad by Heath. After closing the door, Heath and Nina returned to the room. Nina flashed and floated to Heath's side. She crossed her hands on Heath's back and said, Hey, are you really planning to go to that deep sea kiss? Heath said, Why not? This is a rare opportunity for purple coral. We've been looking for it for so long and you've seen the effects. If we miss this opportunity, we don't know how long we'll have to look for a needle in a haystack. Nina rolled her eyes. Then why didn't you just agree to it? Heath said, to keep them in suspense. Nina. Of course, these words were just teasing Nina. The real reason was to make some preparations. Although Jackman spoke very well and his attitude was very friendly, after all, one could not tell a person's heart from their face. Now that they were going to their wizard organization, he still had to prepare some necessary safety measures. If they were in danger, they could still run for their lives, right? Thus, for the next week, Heath simply stopped teaching and stayed in the laboratory to prepare potions and magic scrolls. At his current stage, it was impossible for him to improve his strength in a short period of time, but it was still possible to improve some of his combat abilities, for example, the spiritual water that could restore his spiritual power, the fire dragon potion that could increase his strength, and so on. These were the most effective ways for wizards to improve their combat abilities in a short period of time. In addition, Heath also arranged for a raven to send 2 letters. One was to go to the bloody battlefield, and the other was to go to Shadow Tower. His current strength was still very weak, and his personal strength was very weak in front of the organization. If he really encountered trouble, the organization would have to come out in the end. In the letter, he did not say anything. He just chatted casually with Cassandra and Robert, and told them about what had happened before, and explained that he was going to go to Deep Sea Kiss to testify. In any case, the main meaning of the letter was to ask the organization to come forward in case something happened. After all, he was not alone, but a legitimate light wizard who belonged to an organization. He had to make use of his identity and power. Of course, there was no need to worry too much. Deep Sea Kiss was a legitimate light wizard organization. Abiding by the wizard convention was the most basic. They would not, and would not, target him for no reason. In short, the matter was settled. After making some simple preparations, Heath set off for the town's Redbeard Hotel and found Jackman and Alice. Without further ado, they set off for Deep Sea Kiss the next morning. Chapter 286, Set Sail. A few days later, in the east of the Golden Sea. Cuckoo. Two large white seabirds, each as tall as a man, cooed as they flew on the vast sea. Their rolling eyes stared at the rippling sea below, looking for prey. Their eyes were greedy and cruel. After a wave swept up, a few fish appeared on the surface of the sea. A seabird decisively flapped its wings, tilted its body, and shot into the water like a sharp arrow. The large beak opened and closed, and a sea fish was already in its beak. The big bird, which had eaten its fill, flapped its wings and prepared to fly into the sky. However, at this moment, a black shadow rapidly expanded in the sea. With a splash, a huge object leaped out of the sea. It was an orca. The seabird, which did not have the time to react, was swallowed by the leaping killer whale. The huge body, which was more than 10 meters long, crashed heavily into the water, splashing waves that were several meters high. Not far away from the killer whale was a 3-masted sailboat. The waves that were created pushed the sailboat and made it sway continuously. The splashes that were created fell onto the deck like rain, and the sound of beans being fried was heard. Heath, who was lying on the side of the boat and looking at the sea, was immediately drenched. Nina glared at the bow of the boat and said angrily, "I bet that she did it on purpose." A young girl stood at the bow of the ship, her light blue cloak swaying in the sea breeze. It was Alice from Deep Sea Kiss. At this time, she was standing at the bow of the ship, holding a conch in her hands and blowing it gently on her lips. The strange sound of the waves echoed on the surface of the sea. If one used spiritual power to check, one could easily feel that the conch was releasing a special spiritual sound wave and had a special connection with the killer whales swimming in the sea. The whale-like conch. Nina was right. It was not a coincidence that the whale appeared not far from Heath to hunt for food. It was because Alice was controlling it from the side. Not only was the wind guard broken, but she was also turned into a toad. Alice, who had never been bullied since she was young, could not swallow her anger. In addition, the failure at that time was mainly in Heath's magic tower. The runes all over made her feel that Heath's victory was unfair. Therefore, after returning to the home ground of the ocean, she began to be restless. This was not the first time she had provoked Heath. Heath twitched his mouth. After being a toad for a few days and eating flies and mosquitoes for a few days, no one would feel good about it. After the malicious shape-shifting spell reached a certain level, it could forcibly take out the spiritual consciousness of the target, making the target not only physically but also mentally turn into a toad. In the past few days, Jackman could only feed Alice some mosquitoes in order to prevent Alice from starving. Although they were specially treated, it still made people feel disgusted. This was also one of the reasons why Alice kept clinging to Heath. Moo moo. The killer whale swimming in the sea swayed its large whale tail and dived into the sea. Before leaving, it did not forget to shoot a provocative water line in the direction of Heath. At the same time, Alice, who was controlling her, also gave a provocative snort to Heath. Then, she put down the whale-like conch and went to the cabin. Nina said angrily, "That self-righteous fellow. You really should hang her up and beat her up." Heath ignored her. She was just a spoiled little witch. For the sake of the purple coral, it was not entirely impossible to tolerate her offense. Heath. At this moment, Jackman walked over. When he saw the wet sea water on Heath, he could not help but be stunned. "What happened, my friend?" Nina gritted her teeth and said, "You should ask your sister what she did." Jackman was stunned. At this moment, a whale's cry came from the surface of the sea. It was from the killer whale that had lost the control of the whale-like conch. Jackman suddenly understood. His expression was a little awkward. "Ahem. Alice, this girl is getting more and more outrageous." However, he changed the topic and said, "My friend, I hope you don't take her offense to heart. Trust me, she is just a child who was robbed of her candy. Her life was too smooth. The abundant resources allowed her to become a wizard with her eyes closed. She could not gain any experience and growth in her mind." After getting to know Jackman, Heath knew that Alice was a rare superior talent. She was also one of the 2 most outstanding talents in the body of a wizard. She was truly a natural-born wizard. In addition to the abundant material support provided by Alice's maternal family, Alice's advancement to a wizard was basically smooth sailing. She did not spend much time at all. Heath said in an open-minded manner, "It's understandable." Jackman's face relaxed. "Thank you for your understanding. Of course, I will remind her to maintain her etiquette in private." "Okay." After a simple reply, Heath did not continue on this topic. He changed the topic and said, "How many days until we go to Deep Sea Kiss?" Jackman smiled and said, "What's the matter, my friend? Are you already anxious from waiting?" To be honest, Heath was very comfortable with Jackman's excessive enthusiasm. He didn't know if this guy was acting friendly or what was going on, but they had only known each other for a few days before he started to act all brotherly and friendly. It would be fine if he was a hypocrite like a noble, but this guy always had such a sincere look on his face. This made Heath suspect this guy's sexual orientation. Every time he stood next to him, he couldn't help but imagine a bunch of GY men taking a fancy to him. He subconsciously moved to the side. Not really. He wanted to leave. But Jackman was still in high spirits. Before Heath could finish his sentence, he took the initiative to continue the conversation. "It won't take too long. We'll arrive at the island on the sea in about 2 weeks. Believe me, it's definitely a good place. You'll love it there. If you like it, I can help you stay. An outstanding wizard like you would definitely be welcomed by Deep Sea Kiss. Compared to Shadow Tower, Deep Sea Kiss can provide you with more training resources. How about it? Do you want to consider it?" Thank you. I'll consider it." Jackman said happily, "That's great. I look forward to your reply." After a pause, he seemed to have thought of something and suddenly said, "It would be great if you could join us earlier. In that case, you can also join us for the deep sea feast." "Damn! When did I promise to join you? Don't keep imagining it, okay?" Heath asked curiously, "The deep sea feast? What is that?" Chapter 287, Arrival. Jackman teased, "Oh, so there's still something Wizard Heath doesn't know." Although they hadn't spent much time together, Heath had surprised Jackman more than once these days. Astronomy, geography, history, there seemed to be nothing he didn't know. It was almost like a living encyclopedia. This was also the reason why he admired Heath and took the initiative to become friends with him. Heath said, "I have never come into contact with the Golden Islands." Jackman nodded and explained, "Then I wonder, Heath, have you heard of the Heart of the Sea?" Heath recalled for a moment and said somewhat uncertainly, "Could it be that it is a strange fruit that is said to grow on the bottom of the sea?" He remembered that he had seen it in an anthology of myths about the west coast of the mortal world. It was said that it was a strange fruit that grew in the depths of the sea. It was said that it could make people live forever, have eternal life, and had the power of the sea. There seemed to be some legends about this fruit. It seemed that the sea god would plant seeds in the sea every 30 years or something. Heath had once speculated that if this fruit really existed, it was probably the same as the immortal spring of the elves, which was a substance that increased life force. Jackman's next reply confirmed Heath's guess. He nodded and said, "Yes, there is indeed such a strange fruit growing in an area of the sea on our side of the Golden Islands. For us wizards, this fruit is a rare treasure. It can bring us an increase in spiritual power, an increase in vitality, an increase in the degree of soul alienation, and the refinement of magic power." Heath's eyes lit up. Magic power refinement. Magic power refinement was a concept that only intermediate wizards would come into contact with. It was an essential step for intermediate wizards to become an advanced wizard. Jackman smiled. "Yes." After a pause, he explained in detail, "The Heart of the Sea will mature once every 30 years. After that, the wizard organizations in the Golden Islands will hold a wizard gathering, which is the Deep Sea Feast. During this banquet, all the wizard organizations will send outstanding wizards to that area to collect the Heart of the Sea. This is the full picture of the Deep Sea Feast." So that was the case. Heath could not help but ask, "Is this kind of Heart of the Sea not for sale?" Such a powerful treasure should have been famous, but Heath had never heard of or seen this kind of material on the market, so Heath guessed that it might not be in circulation on the market. Jackman nodded. "Not for sale. The Heart of the Sea are too few in number, and there aren't many fruits that ripen every time. Even the wizard organizations of the Golden Islands can't fully be satisfied, so it's forbidden to sell it." Heath said, "That's a pity." Jackman laughed. "Haha, if you really want it, it's okay. I'll just snatch another one for you later." There's no need for that." Although reason told Heath that this was a good opportunity, in case Jackman was really gay, Heath thought about it and decided to forget about it. The sailboat headed east. After more than a week of sailing, they soon arrived at the border of the sea. On the vast ocean, a straight line appeared. This straight line separated the entire ocean from both sides. One side was blue in color, while the other side was darker in color. The blue side was the common sea area where ordinary humans lived, while the darker side was known as the deep blue sea area. In the world of mortals, it was a forbidden area for life. There were countless terrifying sea monsters, giant octopuses, giant whales, and even giant turtles the size of an island. They could easily tear people into pieces. Only adventurers who didn't care about their lives, pirates who had nowhere to go, and legendary wizards would go there. In some ways, most of the legends about humans were right. This was actually the border that the sea folk race and wizards had jointly defined. The deep blue sea was indeed the territory of the sea tribes, and there were countless sea kings there, and those were very powerful existences even for wizards. It was right for humans to describe them as sea monsters. After arriving at the border of the sea, Jackman ordered the sailors on the ship to hang a blue sail. It was the flag of Deep Sea Kiss. According to the agreement with the sea folk race, only those who hung this flag could sail freely in this area of the sea. Otherwise, if they were to take the normal route, it would take them at least 2 months to take a detour. Of course, this was the territory of the sea folk race after all. If they wanted to pass through the territory of these disharmonious people, it was not possible to rely on just one flag. On the way to the sailboat, they encountered several interceptions from the sea folk, such as the giant hillman octopus, the lobster man, and even the charmer catfish at sea king level. They were powerful sea creatures that Heath had encountered before. These monsters that blocked the sailboat had only one reason. They wanted money. In fact, they had already paid the toll fee for Deep Sea Kiss. For example, the flag they were currently flying was purchased from the sea folk with a huge sum of money from Deep Sea Kiss. It was obviously not appropriate for them to ask for the toll fee now. However, Jackman still satisfied the sea monsters' appetites every time. In his words, "It's better to have less trouble than more trouble. If you reason with these brainless people, you will only end up losing out in the end." Jackman was indeed right. The sea folk race was famous for being a scoundrel among the 9 great races. Most of the entire race was non-intelligent species and sub-intelligent species that were brainless and unable to communicate. The few remaining intelligent species were also scoundrels that were used to running amok. Because of these reasons, the conflicts between the wizards and the sea folk were not the first or second time. There were even many large and small wars. In short, with Jackman's coordination, money clearing the way, the voyage was quite smooth and did not encounter any trouble along the way. Occasionally, some good-tempered sea folk after receiving the money would even send some fish, shrimp, crabs, and so on around the sailboat to help escort them, at the same time giving them fishing recreation, cooking, and so on. The order of the sea folk did not care about the lives of their families. Therefore, in addition to training, Heath also took the fishing rod to sit by the side of the boat with Jackman to enjoy the fun of fishing. There was also a small incident. One evening, when Heath was fishing, he actually caught a bottle of wine. What was even more amazing was that after the cork was opened, a treasure map escaped from the bottle. When a shipwrecked pirate or sailor was in a desperate situation, they would draw a map of the place where they buried their treasure and stuff it into the last empty bottle of wine, letting the ocean deliver it to the fated person. This was a legend that had been circulating for a long time on the west coast, but he did not expect to encounter it one day. Of course, there were pirates who did it, but it was more of a prank played by some bored people based on this legend. Heath could not tell whether it was real or not at the moment. Anyway, it was just an ordinary map that did not have any elemental particles attached to it. It was mostly from the human world. Regardless of whether there was treasure or not. However, what made Heath more curious was that this treasure map was not like other legends, where the sailors' own stories were left behind while the route map was drawn so that the bards could sing about it. On the entire treasure map, other than a simple coordinate and a signature, there was only one sentence. "Save me." Signature, Giro's Alit. A few days later, the sailboat successfully arrived at Deep Sea Kiss. This was the first wizard organization Heath visited after coming to the Golden Islands. Chapter 288, Island. Island of the Sea, an island hidden in the eastern part of the deep blue sea. The island wasn't big, only a few tens of kilometers in size. It was a circular ring, and only the outer ring was exposed. Looking down from a high altitude, it looked like a ring, which was why it was also called Ring Island. Click! With a light sound, the sailboat docked at the dock. The knights who followed the boat jumped off the anchor, tied the rope, and built a bridge to completely stabilize the sailboat on the shore. Wizards, you can get off the boat. Heath followed Jackman and got off the sailboat, looking at the environment in front of him. In front of him was a wide road, about a few hundred meters wide. In the middle of the road was a lush forest, and on both sides of the road were beaches, and on both sides of the beach was the sea. However, the sea water outside was dark blue, while the sea water inside was grey. It looked strange. Jackman explained, "This is the inner sea of our deep sea kiss. Because there are a lot of grey seaweed, the color of the sea water looks like this." Heath said, "Oh. Grey seaweed was a type of magic seaweed. It had the effect of mediating the water source to increase the content of the elements in the water. When breeding sea-type magic creatures in specific areas, wizards like to place some of these grey seaweed in the seawater." Jackman said, "Let's go. There's still a long way ahead. Flying is forbidden here. The wizard master and the others have set up many magic arrays here. If we fly up, we'll be shot down instantly. So we can only walk on our feet." After a pause, he pointed at the road ahead and said, "Every time a new apprentice arrives at the port, the first thing to do is to lead them around the island." Heath smacked his lips and said, "That's still quite a distance." Although the road was not wide, it was long enough that one could not see the end of it at a glance. There must be at least tens of kilometers of it. Jackman laughed and said, "Haha, don't worry. Those are just apprentices whose targets have joined our deep sea kiss. Letting them suffer a little is beneficial to their growth. If they are guests, there is no need for that." Heath raised his eyebrows and expressed his puzzlement. Jackman did not explain. Instead, he brought Heath to the dark grey sea that was separated by a road. When they came to the beach, he took out a conch and gently blew on it. The conch emitted an irregular sound that spread into the distance. Unlike the undulating dark blue sea outside, this grey sea was like a lake. The surface of the water was as calm as a mirror and not the slightest fluctuation could be seen. As the sound fell, ripples quickly appeared on the surface of the sea. The ripples grew faster and faster, accompanied by a series of gulp-gulp sounds. A series of bubbles rose up from the lake, and then, one could only hear splash. A small boat rose up from the bottom of the sea. Jackman pointed to the center of the sea in the distance and said, "Our deep sea kiss is actually there." Heath looked at the center of the sea, but found nothing. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Illusion?" Jackman nodded and said, "It only looks empty. We will only find it when we get closer." Heath was speechless and said, "The defense measures of Deep Sea Kiss are really extraordinary." Heath almost suspected that this was a dark wizard organization. If it was not for the wizards who were familiar with this place, it would not be easy to find them. Jackman said, "There's nothing we can do. Unlike you wizards on land, we are directly connected to those disgusting creatures in the sea. Laws and conventions have always been short-lived for them. No one knows when those guys will come looking for trouble." Heath suddenly understood. "I see. Okay, let's go." Jackman then beckoned Heath to sit on the small boat. Clack, clack, clack. At this moment, the sound of flapping wings was heard, accompanied by the sound of cuckoo, cuckoo, and a grey owl flew over from the forest in the distance. Jackman, who was about to board the boat, suddenly stopped when he saw the owl. At the same time, the owl circled around and shouted, "Jackman! Jackman! Why didn't you greet Miss Nasha when you came back? Why didn't you greet Miss Nasha when you came back? Coo, coo! Are you trying to rebel? Coo, coo!" Jackman frowned. "I have a guest to entertain. I'll look for her when I'm done here." The owl continued, "What guest is more important than Miss Nasha? Cuckoo! What guest is more important than Miss Nasha? Cuckoo!" At this moment, Heath suddenly felt a strange sensation under his feet. He looked down and saw an unremarkable little flower suddenly appear under his feet. It looked unremarkable, but Heath keenly felt an elemental fluctuation from it. He hurriedly moved to the side to avoid it. And almost at the same time that he moved to the side, the strange little flower beneath his feet suddenly opened its petals in a human-like manner, and like an arm, it hugged the spot that Heath had stepped on just now. Bang! The little flower on the ground exploded in a strange manner, leaving a crater on the spot. Heath frowned. The owl said, "Cuckoo! No one is more important than Miss Nasha, no one. Cuckoo! All right, if you don't want your guest to be hurt, go to the love forest now." After saying this, the owl flapped its wings and flew away. Jackman cursed angrily, "Troublesome woman! He frowned and said to Heath, "Heath, my friend, I have some private matters to take care of. I can't send you over. You follow Alice. Alice, help me bring Heath over." Alice, who was at the side, snorted lightly and did not say anything. However, her attitude clearly explained everything. Jackman said, "My sister, I am very serious in asking you. This is very important to me." Alice hesitated for a moment and eventually took a step back. However, she still stubbornly said, "I won't be on the same boat as him." "All right, Heath, I'll hand you over to Alice." Oh. Jackman left, while Heath sat alone on the small boat. Alice took out the conch and summoned another small boat by herself. She boarded the boat and said coldly, "Sit on the boat and don't move. Don't care what happens in the sea. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences." Then, she blew a syllable at the conch and the boat went into the sea. Just as her boat started to sail, Heath's boat started to move for no reason. It followed the boat in front and headed towards the center of the sea. No matter what happens in the sea, don't pay attention to it. Could it be that there are dangerous goods here? Looking at the dark grey sea, Heath frowned in his heart. The hospitality of this deep-sea kiss made him very dissatisfied. Forget it. At the very least, Jackman didn't seem to be gay. But what if he wasn't gay? He looked at him with shining eyes all day long. Could it be he was bisexual? Wizards with a long history could not be understood using the structure of normal creatures. There were many wizards who liked both women and men at the same time. Some wizards were even attracted to wild beasts and even strange creatures. Heath had heard of witches who raised tentacle-type demonized creatures to meet their physiological needs and so on. Chapter 289, Young Girl. Splash! 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 The faint sound of water flowing echoed on the surface of the sea. The small boat slowly sailed towards the center of the sea. Two ripples spread out on both sides, like a curtain cut open by scissors. Heath sat at the bow of the boat and sized up the grey sea. It was as if a layer of grey ink had been injected into the sea. The entire sea was grey. However, if one were to observe carefully, one would discover that the grey color was actually a layer of algae that was not in the sea water. These algae filled the entire sea surface densely, thus causing the sea water to appear grey. When one pushed aside the grey color above and looked down, one would discover that under the grey curtain was a colorful world. Sea fish, corals, shellfish, and all sorts of strange aquatic creatures covered the bottom of the sea. Blue-eyed silverfish. Red shells. Ah, even bee fish. This deep-sea kiss is really rich. With a glance, Heath saw a lot of magic materials that he had only read about in books, and some of them were even very high-level magic materials. These materials should be able to be extracted. Thinking excitedly, Heath immediately waved at the water. With a whoosh, a strange creature jumped out of the water and flew into Heath's hand. It was an octopus the size of a palm, but its appearance was not as smooth and wet as other octopuses. Instead, it was wrinkled, like a piece of rags. There were holes all over it, and its mouth was filled with sharp teeth and chrysanthemum-like mouthparts. It looked exceptionally terrifying. This cloth octopus was also known as the terrifying octopus. It was a low-level demonized creature that lived in the sea. Although its level was not high, it had a very high talent in the spirit system. It hunted food by creating terrifying illusions. Heath grabbed the octopus with one hand and took out a dagger with the other. He was ready to end this little monster. However, at this moment, Alice suddenly turned around in front of him and stared at the octopus in his hand with her big eyes. Seeing this, Heath raised the octopus in his hand and shook it. "It's okay to take an octopus, right?" Alice did not say anything else. Heath held the dagger and stabbed into the octopus's anus-like mouthpart. With a poof sound, the dagger pierced into it and seemed to cut something. The octopus that was originally writhing in Heath's palm suddenly stopped moving. The greyish-black color on its body also rapidly retreated in an instant. In an instant, its entire body became transparent. Heath then muttered in his heart, "Extraction." Beep, extraction successful. Spiritual power plus 0.1. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained life sequence of terrifying octopus. Beep, extraction successful. Soul energy increased. A series of notification sounds quickly sounded in Heath's ears, and a pure spiritual energy quickly surged into his mind. Heath's face lit up. Sure enough. He immediately turned on the system's remote extraction function and maximized the range. As the range extraction function was turned on, the system's notifications rang in his mind. Beep, extraction successful. Spiritual power plus 0.1. Beep, extraction successful. Strength increased. Beep, extraction successful. Along with the continuous sounds, Heath could feel waves of strength continuously surging into his body. His strength, agility, physique, and spiritual power had all increased significantly. Looking at the constantly jumping numbers on the system, Heath was even happier. This trip had not been in vain. While he was happily extracting his attributes, Heath took the small boat and slowly sailed towards the center of the sea. When he was about to reach the center of the sea, a layer of faint fog suddenly drifted over from there. At this time, Heath was still immersed in the pleasure of the attribute growth and did not notice the change in the sea surface. By the time he came back to his senses, the fog on the surface of the sea had already made it seem as if a large bundle of grey straw had been burned inside the house. The visibility was even less than 3 meters, and he could see the distance between them clearly. Strange, where did this fog come from? Why didn't I see it when I was on the shore just now? Feeling surprised, Heath looked in the direction of Alice in front of him. The two boats were only a few meters away from each other, but Alice was only left with a silhouette in the thick fog. Heath wanted to ask what was going on, but before he could say anything, the silhouette in front of him disappeared, and all he could see was a vast expanse of white fog. Heath shouted, "Alice! Alice! Alice! Alice!" There was no response from Alice, but there was indeed a series of echoes. It did not seem like they were drifting in the endless deep sea. Instead, it seemed like they had walked into an empty valley. Heath frowned. He stood on the ship and looked around. However, all he could see was white fog. The top of his head and the surface of the sea were filled with white fog. In such a world, Heath could not tell if the ship was still moving forward. He could not feel the progress, the ripples, or the ups and downs of the ship. The scenery in front of him did not change at all. It was as if he had entered a world of stillness. What's going on? Heath frowned. The scene in front of him was really too strange. There was an indescribable sense of strangeness. Could it be that the girl had used her official position to seek personal revenge and lured him to this strange place? Heath could not help but doubt. My heart only belongs to you. Trekking through mountains and rivers, thousands of miles away, no matter where you go, wherever I go. No matter when and where. I'll always be by your side, till death do us part. At this moment, a female voice suddenly sounded. It was a voice that Heath had never heard before. The voice was like the music of the heavens. The song was pleasant to the ears and the tune was graceful and melodious. If one wanted to find an adjective to describe the overall combination, Heath could only think of it as perfect. An inexplicable emotion was naturally released in Heath's heart. Listening to this song, one could not help but want to see the owner of the song. He could not help but look in the direction where the voice came from. He saw that in the midst of the white fog, there seemed to be a reef protruding on the sea surface. On the reef, there seemed to be a human figure sitting on it. Judging from the outline, it seemed to be a woman. For some reason, there seemed to be some kind of magic that attracted Heath to investigate. Under the control of this magic, the small boat that Heath was on also slowly and uncontrollably sailed towards the reef. Seeing that the figure in front of him was becoming clearer and clearer, Heath was almost able to see the face of the figure. However, at this moment, the figure seemed to have sensed that Heath was approaching, and the graceful and melodious singing stopped abruptly. Splash! The young girl jumped into the water, splashing a large amount of water. The last thing Heath could see seemed to be a large fish tail. An inexplicable emotion rose in the bottom of Heath's heart, and he could not help but feel regret and pity. He looked around, but he could not see the figure on the sea. However, just as he was feeling disappointed, he suddenly heard a light clicking sound coming from behind him. He turned around and looked back. All of a sudden, he saw a girl lying on the side of the boat for no reason. Chapter 290, Mermaid. Suddenly, a young girl appeared beside the boat. She was lying on the edge of the boat with her hands crossed. She was looking at Heath with her big, bright eyes. It was an extremely beautiful young girl. She was about 16 or 17 years old. She had a pair of big, sapphire-like eyes. Her skin was as white as a pearl. Behind her, her hair was as bright as flowing gold. She lay by the side of the boat, her eyes filled with curiosity, as if it was the first time a peasant girl in a remote town saw a knight coming from afar. The girl stared at Heath for a while, then asked, "Can I come up?" "Oh." Heath stepped back a little. "Go ahead." The girl released her hands and pushed the boat up slightly. With a splash, she jumped out of the water and sat on the boat. At the same time, the girl's full appearance was completely exposed to Heath. It was a perfect but very strange body. Her upper body was exactly the same as an ordinary human girl's. She had a slim waist that was like a water snake without the slightest bit of fat, tall and round breasts, and a beautiful and curvy collarbone. She looked like a doll. However, the lower half of her body was very strange. The large forked tail of the fish was covered with fine blue scales. This was a legendary mermaid. Heath asked cautiously, "Were you singing just now?" Mermaids were one of the top high-level demonized creatures in the sea race. They were also one of the few intelligent species in the sea folk race. This race only had females and every mermaid had unparalleled beauty and an angelic voice. In order to reproduce, they would sing on the surface of the sea to attract passing sailors. They would use the sailors who were infatuated with their beauty to get pregnant, and then eat the sailors as food for consumption during pregnancy. The girl burst out laughing. Heath raised his eyebrows. "What?" The girl sneered. "In this place, it's really rare for a mermaid to make a wizard wary. Shouldn't the one who should be afraid be Nami?" A mermaid's cruelty was only relative to ordinary human sailors, but to wizards, they were actually very little of a threat. Most of the time, they used materials to take advantage of the wizard's experimental table. Mermaid meat was still a good delicacy in the wizard world. Heath shrugged and did not answer, but asked in return, "Nami? Is that your name?" The girl said, "Which Nasha gave it to me. She likes to name everything, including her white mice, her knife and fork, and the tomatoes she ate this morning." Heath's mouth twitched. He turned his head to look around and asked, "I think I'm lost. I was going to deep sea kiss." Nami said, "Don't worry. The ship is still moving. You can't feel the advance because of the magic array set up by the wizards. After all, this is the masterpiece of an intermediate wizard." Heath was slightly stunned. He quickly closed his eyes and released his spiritual tentacles into the surroundings. Soon, he noticed the runes all around him. So that's how it is. This discovery made Heath feel a little ashamed. He had always claimed to be proficient in magic arrays, but he did not notice the magic array that was right in front of him. It had to be said that this was indeed a shameful thing. There is no prohibition on learning. It is better not to be arrogant in the future. Actually, this could not be entirely blamed on him. The difference between an intermediate rank wizard and a beginner rank wizard was equivalent to the difference between an apprentice and a wizard. This difference was in magic power, runes, and even knowledge. Based on the knowledge of an intermediate wizard, it was reasonable for a beginner wizard like him to not be able to notice the magic array. Opening his eyes, he thanked her. "Thank you." Nami smiled. "You're welcome. You're Jackman's friend, and I'm Jackman's friend." Heath smiled. "Heath Noen, nice to meet you." Nami brushed her hair. "Nice to meet you." At that moment, the white fog in the air gradually faded. Alice, who had disappeared, reappeared in Heath's field of vision. She had clearly been there the entire time, but she had ignored Heath's shouts. Nami said, "You've arrived at your destination, Heath." Heath nodded. "Yes." Nami blinked her eyes playfully and said, "Alice is famous for being unruly and capricious in Deep Sea Kiss. All the wizards who have provoked her have been tormented by her. If I were you, I would either stay away from her or sleep with her." "Haha." The corner of Heath's mouth twitched. "Then, let's chat again when we have time. Goodbye." "Goodbye." After saying that, Nami jumped into the water. With a swing of her large fish tail, she quickly sank into the water. Heath turned his head and looked ahead. At this time, the fog had basically dispersed. The originally empty center of the lake had now become a new scene. It was a small floating island, and on the floating island stood an ancient castle. A few days later, Deep Sea Kiss, Wizard Castle, Conch Room. The center of the spacious conch room was laid with a thin layer of sand. On the sand was a huge conch that was as tall as a person. The flesh inside the conch had disappeared without a trace, leaving only a shell. The shell was covered with dense runes, like twisted tadpoles. The giant conch was also known as the Big Conch. It was a rule-based wizard tool that could distinguish between lies and falsehoods. It was said to be made by a stigmata-level wizard. "Then, Brother Heath, I'll leave it to you. Tell the conch what happened to you in detail. Leave the rest to magic. The conch will prove everything you said. Heath walked up to the conch and sized it up. It was about 3 meters tall, not much different from the other conches. Its twisted body was covered with protruding hard objects. There was a pointy one that looked like a trumpet. What was strange was that there were twisted runes all over its body. The runes were tadpole-shaped, and they looked like they were still wriggling and flowing, as if they were alive. Heath stared at the flowing runes, his eyes full of curiosity. Rule runes. These were runes used at the level of rule-type spells, and they belonged to the higher level of spell knowledge in the wizard world. Speaking of which, it was not his first time coming into contact with rule-type wizardry. There was even a blueprint of rule-type wizardry stored in his mind. However, until now, his understanding of rule-type wizardry was not very high. Basically, he only knew a little about it. The reason was because of these runes. These runes were the higher level knowledge of wizards in the wizard world. In the past, he had only read a few bits and pieces of introduction in books and had never been systematically trained. And because of this, although he had extracted a set of blueprints of a rule-type wizard tool through the system, he actually didn't quite understand the contents of the blueprint. Can I extract anything from this conch? As he thought curiously, Heath placed a hand on the conch and muttered in his heart, extract. Chapter 291, Recovery. Beep, extraction failed. The system's notification sounded. As expected, it failed. After all, there was no damage to the conch's body, and the original protective measures were not ineffective. There was also no mark of Heath's spiritual power left on it, so it was natural for it to fail without any holes. I wonder if I can find the relevant knowledge of rules and runes here. I'll ask if I can go to the library to take a look later. Heath let go of the hand that was attached to the conch and bent his waist a little, aiming his mouth at the raised tip of the conch. At the same time, the swimming runes on the conch stopped altogether. The round, tadpole-like head was aimed in Heath's direction and tilted to one side, as if waiting for something. A dreamy whisper sounded in Heath's ear. The voice said, "I'm listening." Heath took a gentle breath and began to explain, "Not long ago, I went to Shipwreck Bay to collect materials." After the explanation. Wizard Castle, guest room. "My friend, thank you very much for your help. You can stay here for now. I have an important spell experiment to deal with. When I'm done here, I'll take you to visit my teacher. Before that, Amy will take care of your food and living. If you need anything, just let her know. Also, I'll tell you in secret that she's still a virgin." Haha. After the deposition, Jackman arranged for Heath to stay in the guest room and specially selected a female apprentice to take care of his food and living. The room was very spacious, about 200 to 300 square meters. There were bedrooms, laboratories, meditation rooms, washrooms, leisure terraces, and all kinds of facilities. There was also a dock downstairs. It was convenient to go out to sea. "Wizard. Wizard, do you need Amy to prepare hot water for you?" Apprentice Amy stood at the side and said timidly with her head lowered. Her slightly shy face was as red as a red apple. The female apprentice that Jackman had arranged for Heath had been carefully selected. Her looks, figure, and posture need not be mentioned. In addition, she had no experience with men and women, so she was always shy and nervous. She was like a peach that had just ripened, and there was a different kind of attraction from top to bottom. Heath shook his head. "No, I want to rest first." Amy lowered her head. Oh. He didn't know how she came to understand the word rest, but she walked to the bed and began to take off her cloak. Heath waved his hand. "You go out first. I want to be alone for a while." He didn't want to give the impression that he was frivolous since he had just arrived. Moreover, this Jackman was busy giving away women. His excessive enthusiasm always made Heath feel strange. Oh. Amy let out a sigh of relief, but her heart was even more disappointed. This was the wizard world. There was no such thing as shamelessness. What was truly important to a wizard was the magic stones in their hands. A young apprentice like her, who got up early and went to bed early, would only earn a few hundred magic stones a month. If she could establish a relationship with an official wizard, even if he gave her something, it would be an immeasurable treasure to her. "Wait a minute." Just as she walked to the door, Heath's voice came from behind. Amy quickly turned around. The nervousness on her face had disappeared. "Wizard, what can I do for you?" Before this, she had been a little hesitant, but after experiencing the disappointment just now, she had completely forgotten about the hesitation in her heart. At this time, Amy had completely understood what she wanted. Unfortunately, she was wrong again. Heath only asked, "Is there a library in Deep Sea Kiss?" Amy was stunned. "A library?" Heath nodded. "I want to look up some information." After confirming that Heath was not speaking in code, Amy could only believe that the wizard in front of her was not going to enjoy her. She was very disappointed. Even so, she still replied seriously, "Yes, there is an apprentice library on the first floor of the castle. It is mainly open to us apprentices. Anyone can enter. There is also a wizard library on the top floor of the castle. This can only be entered by the authorization of the wizards. In addition, each wizard has a private collection of books." Heath nodded. "I see." Amy said, "Yes. Is there anything else I can help you with, wizard?" Heath smiled. "It's fine." After thinking for a while, he took out a medium-grade magic stone and threw it at her. "Well, it's our first time meeting. This is for you." After all these years, Heath was worth more than 10 million. A medium-grade magic stone was nothing to him. However, this was a genuine treasure to the young apprentice in front of him. A medium-grade magic stone was equivalent to 100 magic stones. This was enough for her to work hard for half a month on a normal day. After receiving the magic stone, she bowed to Heath several times and thanked him before slowly leaving. Her excited expression was obvious that the young apprentice was eager to show off to her companions. Taking care of wizards, no matter which wizard organization it was a rare and beautiful job. After sending Amy away, Heath went to the balcony and pulled out a chair to sit down. He took out a portion of cocoa from his space pocket and soaked it for himself. The castle was built on the seaside. The side of Heath's guest room was also facing the sea. The view was very good. Sitting here, you could directly see the sea view in front of you. Sipping cocoa, admiring the sea view, and blowing the sea breeze, Heath enjoyed the rare pleasure. However, at this moment, a voice broke the silence. "Yawn." A lazy yawn sounded. With that, a cloud of smoke rose from the ring in Heath's hand, and soon, Nina, dressed in a red dress, flew out. She looked like she had just woken up. She was still yawning and rubbing her sleepy eyes. However, she soon saw the scenery around her. The sleepiness in her eyes was swept away. She said in surprise, Have we arrived?" Heath said, "We arrived yesterday." Nina frowned. "Ah, I didn't miss anything, did I? Were we attacked by sea monsters on the way? Where are the pirates? We destroyed them, didn't we? What was this guy thinking all day long?" Heath rolled his eyes. "We didn't. There were no sea monsters, no pirates. We were very safe. We arrived here safely." Nina curled her lips. "Pfft, boring." Heath stopped the topic. His gaze swept over Nina's body. He could see that her body was becoming more and more solid. "How about you? How's your recovery?" Not long ago, Heath had concocted some potions to recover her soul power and fed them to Nina. During this period of time, she had stayed in the ring to absorb the effects of the potions. With a wave of her hand, Nina conveniently avoided the teacup in Heath's hand and drank it. She laughed and said, "What do you think?" Seeing her actions, Heath could not help but ask in surprise, "You can already materialize?" Although Nina could materialize before this, she needed to deliberately mobilize her soul power to do so. However, he did not feel that Nina had done anything on purpose before materializing. Other than the fact that her appearance was somewhat transparent, she was practically like a living person. Nina moved her wrist and said, "Although I still don't feel anything, I really don't need to intentionally materialize to touch things. Of course, I can still do the same if I want to." She pressed her hand under the table and her arm quickly passed through the table. Nina joked, "It seems that your research is very effective. Wizard Heath, my teacher will be very surprised if he finds out." Heath did not pay attention to her, but just stared at her transparent body and pondered. A soul that had lost a body could rematerialize after a long time of recovery. If it continued to recover, would it be able to create a new body? If so, was this another eternal way? Chapter 292, Books. A few days later, in the apprentice library of Deep Sea Kiss. In the spacious library, Heath was shuttling between rows of bookshelves, picking up and putting down books one by one. It looked like an ordinary book selection, but every time he picked up and put them down, only he could hear the voice ringing in his ears. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained the complete collection of the Sea Folk Race's totem. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained the detailed distribution of the ruins of Aramstead. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained the mysterious sea area. The collection of books in the library of Deep Sea Kiss was beyond Heath's expectations. The number of books was almost 3 times that of the books in Shadow Tower, and only a few of them overlapped with Shadow Tower. Most of them were new knowledge that Heath had never mastered before. This made Heath extremely happy. After all these years of continuous collection in the West Coast continent, he had basically extracted all the knowledge points in the West Coast continent. The occasional book collection mostly overlapped with the existing knowledge. It was rare to find such a large area of new knowledge. Astronomy, geography, races, demonized creatures, and so on. Heath had gained new knowledge here, and the entire database had been expanded a lot. Don't think that this was useless knowledge. In the process of a wizard's training, any knowledge could be useful. To a wizard, knowledge was power. Wizard, these are all books about runes of laws. Do you need anything? A crisp voice sounded, and Amy, dressed in a blue wizard robe, walked over. She was holding a tall stack of books in her hands. There were more records about runes of laws in the Golden Islands than in the West Coast. Heath wanted to see if he could use this opportunity to collect some information and understand the relevant knowledge. She walked to Heath and loosened her hands. The books fell heavily on the desk. Whew! Amy heaved a sigh of relief. She pushed the black-rimmed glasses on her nose and said, "Well, all the books related to the runes of the rules in the apprentice's library are here." After getting along with her, Heath realized that Amy was actually very short-sighted. Before, she hadn't worn the glasses because she was worried that it would affect her image and make Heath look down on her. After that, when she was walking, she almost bumped into a wall, so she had to put the glasses back on. Heath turned to look at Amy. To be honest, Heath felt that it was unnecessary for Amy to take off her glasses on purpose. He had seen many beautiful eyes that looked the same. On the contrary, such unique flaws were more interesting, like now. Amy was leaning against the desk, one hand supporting the table, and the other hand gently stroking her cheek. Because it was too hot, 2 buttons on her collar were loosened, and a snow-white natural shade was revealed. Her outstanding figure made her cloak bulge. Her seductive figure and face, coupled with her sacred and solemn glasses, gave her an inexplicable coquettish feeling, which added to her charm. Under the stimulation of this strange feeling, Heath couldn't help but take another look at the bespectacled girl. Heath. When she didn't get a response, Amy turned around in confusion and happened to see Heath staring at the unbuttoned button on her chest. A blush appeared on Amy's face. She subconsciously raised her hand to cover it, but before her hand touched her chest, she seemed to have thought of something and stopped, looking very conflicted. She had come here in order to have something to do with Heath. In that case, she should let him see her. After thinking for a while, Amy took a deep breath. She suddenly lowered her head and said, "Wizard Heath, in fact, very few apprentices come to the apprentice library. Even if there are occasionally apprentices who come in, they only look up the information they need in a hurry. No one will pay attention to what's going on here." The implication was self-evident. After a pause, she added, "I have a few classmates who always like to be in the library with their partners. They say that it's quite exciting here, and there's a kind of sneaky pleasure." The corner of Heath's mouth twitched. No wonder it was said that every pair of glasses hid a pervert that was sealed. These words really made some sense. Heath said, "Your classmates sure have some personality." After a pause, he changed the topic. "But to me, the library is a place for reading. Thank you for bringing me the books. I think I should be happy with this." Amy was very disappointed. Heath didn't continue the topic. He waved his hand, and a book slowly flew into his hand. He pretended to flip through it for a while, but in fact, Heath was secretly extracting the contents. Then, Heath raised his finger and gently pointed in the air. The books brought by Amy also flew up one by one and floated toward Heath's hand like obedient birds. Seeing this scene, Amy said enviously, "Wizard, your wizard's hand is really good." Amy also had a force field element, so she had learned the standard spell, the wizard's hand. However, she was only an intermediate-level apprentice, and her level in this field was completely different from Heath's. Heath said casually, "Do you want to learn it?" I'll teach you when I have time. Amy's eyes lit up. Ah? Really? Wizard, are you kidding me? Heath replied nonchalantly, I've kept my word so far. This little witch had been running around for the past 2 days. It wasn't a big deal to give her some pointers on magic practice, was it? To him, it was just a small matter, but to Amy, it was really a matter of luck. The guidance of an official wizard was something that many apprentices dreamed of. Amy said excitedly, meeting Wizard Heath is the luckiest thing in Amy's life. Not really. Looking at Amy's excited look, Heath couldn't help but be curious. Is it rare to learn in Deep Sea Kiss? Magic knowledge. Amy nodded. Wizards are very busy. Except for their students, they rarely teach other people. Ordinary apprentices like us can only learn by ourselves. From Amy, Heath also roughly understood the operation order of Deep Sea Kiss. Similar to Shadow Tower, their apprentices were divided into ordinary apprentices and official apprentices. Ordinary apprentices were basically equal to the organization's free labor, resources, and knowledge. They had to rely on themselves for everything related to cultivation. They had to get up early and go to the dark every day and constantly take on missions to earn a meager amount of magic stones. However, these magic stones were not enough for cultivation, so it was impossible for them to have the spare time to go to wizards to learn magic knowledge. Because of this, most of the apprentices had a weak grasp of magic, like Amy. With the help of the system, 2 weeks later, Heath extracted all the books in the apprentice library of Deep Sea Kiss. The whole process was done under the noses of the people of Deep Sea Kiss. However, the funny thing was that no one knew that he had done this. Otherwise, no matter how generous Deep Sea Kiss was, they would not have opened the library to him. The only problem was that there was nothing valuable about the records of the runes of the Rule series. There was a lot of content, but most of it was the same as what Heath knew. It seems that higher-level runes can only be found in the wizard library. But that kind of place is the core area for any wizard organization. It's impossible for it to be open to an outsider like me. How can I get in? While Heath was thinking, Jackman, who had brought Heath here, finally ended his magic experiment and came before Heath again. After he arrived, Heath finally had the chance to go to the wizard library. Chapter 293, Go! Deep Sea Kiss, Heath's guest room, reception room. In the middle of the room, there was a low table with 2 sofas on each side. Heath and Jackman were sitting on one of the sofas. On the table were 2 cups of steaming hot cocoa and some common snacks such as dried lizards and spider legs. Yawn. Jackman yawned tiredly. He picked up the cocoa on the table, blew on the hot air, and took a sip. My friend, I'm sorry to have left you hanging there for so long. Did Amy do anything wrong? Heath nodded. She is an excellent apprentice. She helped me a lot. Jackman smiled. If you like it, I'll give her to you as a small gift. How about it? There aren't many toys like this. Heath shook his head. Forget it. Then, he didn't continue the topic. He looked around Jackman. Compared to Jackman, who looked a little miserable a few days ago, he had 2 black eye sockets and a pale face. He was yawning at all times, he looked dispirited. Heath raised his eyebrows and asked, How was it? Did your experiment go well? When he mentioned the experiment, Jackman's expression became a little bitter. He smiled bitterly and said, It didn't go well. Vitality knowledge is still a bit too much for me now. A lot of knowledge isn't enough. Heath said, Sometimes if you can't get over it, you have to stop and rest first. Maybe after a while, you'll understand. Jackman smiled bitterly and said, I want to, but time can't wait for me. Wizard Heath should have heard of the fruit of life, right? It's not easy to get it. It's 50 years of life. It would be a pity if you missed it. The fruit of life was a fruit of life force in the wizard world. It was mostly used at the wizard level to increase a wizard's lifespan, and could extend the lifespan of a wizard by 50 years at most. This fruit had a special characteristic. It had a certain shelf life, and after the fruit matured, it would naturally fall to the ground. After a period of time, if it wasn't used, it would gradually lose its medicinal properties. In the end, it would become an ordinary secular fruit and rot away. It was actually a very troublesome thing for a wizard to increase their vitality. Heath seemed to have it easy because his knowledge was broad enough. In addition, he had been lucky enough to obtain a set of knowledge that specialized in studying vitality. He did not know who the author of the set of life science that was extracted from Viscount Lester was, but the methods involved in increasing vitality were extremely outstanding and easy to achieve. If he did not have that set of knowledge, Heath would definitely be like Jackman. In order to improve his vitality, he had to go through some messy experiments. Not only did he need to invest a lot of resources and energy, but it was also filled with danger. Heath said, "Fruit of life? That's really a little troublesome. I think you're still young. There will be plenty of opportunities in the future, right? If there's no need, it's better not to use the fruit of life." Fruit of life was actually a very unstable material. Whether it was for experiments or concocting potions, the slightest carelessness would cause a backlash. Jackman's eyes lit up, and he said in surprise, "So, Heath, you even know about fruit of life?" Heath nodded. "I've read about this kind of fruit in a pharmaceutics book before." But after a pause, he quickly added, "But I don't know much about it. I just know some basic pharmacology. I heard that this thing is very dangerous." In fact, Viscount Leicester's life science knowledge about the fruit of life had a detailed introduction, but Heath was not ready to expose his ability in this area. This knowledge was too complicated and rare. It would easily arouse suspicion. No matter how talented one was, there should be a limit. Jackman said with some disappointment, "That's a pity. With your help, my experiment would be much easier." "All right, let's stop talking about the fruit of life. I came here today to find you because I have good news to inform you. My friend, my teacher's meditation has ended, and he has heard about you. He has agreed to meet you." Jackman paused and added, "I also mentioned the purple coral to him. My teacher did not object to it. I think you might have a great chance." Heath's eyes lit up. The purple coral gave him a headache for a while. Seeing that the day of advancement was getting closer and closer, but he still could not get sublimation water, Heath was a little anxious. Even so, Heath still put on a calm look and said, "Is that so? Then when can we meet?" Jackman said, "Teacher just finished meditating and usually needs to rest for 1 to 2 weeks. These 2 weeks can be any time. But I think it's better for us to go earlier. Teacher's schedule might be full in the future." Heath nodded. "Then, you make the decision." Jackman said, "How about tomorrow morning? I'll tell teacher. I'll take you to visit him tomorrow morning." Heath said, "Okay." The next morning, Heath followed Jackman to his teacher's residence. It was not in the castle, or even on this floating island. It was on another floating island in the east of the sea area. They could only go there by boat. Most of the wizards in Deep Sea Kiss were like this. They did not live in the castle. Instead, they built their own wizard towers in the surrounding areas for themselves and their apprentices to live in. It was like a kingdom in a kingdom. The castle was mainly left for the apprentices and some wizards who did not have the money to build wizard towers to live in. Jackman was an example. On the way, Heath heard Jackman briefly introduce his teacher. He said that this teacher was an advanced level wizard. A wizard at this level was definitely at the top level in a small place like Deep Sea Kiss. Generally speaking, even if they were not a wizard master, they were still a core member who held the right to speak. However, Jackman's teacher was not like that. Although he was powerful, he was only a magic consultant in Deep Sea Kiss. He could be said to be a dispensable existence at the border. The main reason was that this wizard was not a wizard trained by Deep Sea Kiss. He did not even come from the Golden Islands, but from Farron in the middle of the continent. He came here on a trip. For some reason, he was recruited by Deep Sea Kiss and became a magic consultant here. Most of the wizard organizations were vigilant towards those not trained by their own people. Therefore, even though this mentor had the strength of an advanced level wizard, he was still unable to enter the core level of power. Splash! The sound of delicate water was heard. The small boat slowly sailed into the depths of the sea. Just like before, when they reached an area, the sea was naturally filled with a layer of fog. These days, Heath had gained more knowledge about this layer of fog. This was a high-level magic array that was placed under the sea. It was a combination of magic knowledge such as illusion, mind, and poison. In addition to being able to hide a large area, it could also identify the person who entered it. Any malicious intent would immediately turn the fog into a deadly poison. Soon, the white fog gradually dispersed. At the same time, a different island appeared before Heath's eyes. Chapter 294, Trade. This was a specially organized forest. Lush trees, lush lawns, and colorful flowers blooming in the middle of the lawns. Upon closer inspection, these flowers and trees all had facial features similar to humans. When Heath and his boat approached, these flowers and trees all turned their heads to look at the two of them, their expressions full of vigilance. This is the personal territory of Wizard Orinoco. Do not approach without permission. This is the personal territory of Wizard Orinoco. Do not approach without permission. They opened their mouths and issued a stern warning to Heath and Jackman. The branches of some trees had already extended towards them, as if they were ready to launch an attack at any moment. I haven't been here for a long time. I almost forgot, this has to stay on our chest. Jackman walked forward and took out two unique badges. One was given to Heath, and the other was placed on his chest. Heath took the badge and put it on his chest as well. The solemn expressions on the flowers and trees that looked like they were about to have a storm disappeared, and they all changed into smiling faces. Welcome to the territory of Wizard Orinoco. Welcome to the territory of Wizard Orinoco. Jackman said apologetically, I'm sorry, my friend. I haven't been here for a long time. I was a little careless. I don't think I scared you, right? Heath shook his head. Then he stared at the flowers and trees and asked curiously, is this a plant guard? Similar to golem puppets, plant guardians were also a kind of magical creation. They were just ordinary plants. Wizards could use magic to force them to have some intelligence so that they could perform simple operations such as guarding the door. In places that were better than golem puppets, plant guardians could absorb nutrients in the soil and convert them into energy without having to consume magic stones like golem guardians. Jackman nodded. My teacher is very good at botany. While chatting casually, the two of them walked into the depths of the island. After passing through a narrow path, a small valley appeared in front of them. In the middle of the valley stood a small white tower. It was not big, only a few meters tall. The outer wall was white and covered with thriving nettles. It looked very unique. In front of the small white tower was a nursery planted with 7 night flowers. At this time, a hunchbacked little old man was standing in front of the nursery watering with a watering can in his hand. Heath rarely used the word little old man to describe an elderly man, but the old man in front of him was very fitting for this description. He looked really small, only about 120 or 130 centimeters. If one did not look at the wrinkles on his face that looked like old tree bark, it would really be easy to misunderstand him as an underage child. Under the gaze of Heath, the old man seemed to have noticed something and suddenly raised his head to look in his direction. There was actually still a distance of several hundred meters between them. However, at this moment, Heath clearly felt 2 sharp rays of light shooting towards him, just like 2 sharp arrows that were unsheathed. Heath only felt a piercing pain in his eyes. Subconsciously, he quickly mobilized his magic power and activated his soul companion body. Only then did he feel better. Hey! The little old man suddenly gave a slight doubt, as if he was puzzled that Heath was blocking his vision. It was a long description, but the contact between the two was actually in a flash. From an outsider's point of view, it was the old man turning his head to look at Heath. Jackman, who was beside him, did not even notice the slightest abnormality. Jackman saw the old man turn his head and quickly waved to him, shouting, "Teacher." Then he introduced to Heath, "This is my teacher, Wizard Orinoco. He is an advanced wizard." Heath nodded, "I can see that." The two came to the old wizard. Jackman bowed and said, "Teacher." Wizard Orinoco nodded slightly, and then his gaze fell on Heath, who was next to him, with a slight smile on his face. He asked curiously, "Jackman, is this the friend from the west coast that you mentioned before?" Jackman nodded and said, "Yes, teacher. His name is Heath." After a pause, he added, "Heath is a very outstanding wizard. He has extraordinary knowledge and profound strength." Orinoco nodded repeatedly. He said to Heath, "When I heard that Jackman was defeated by a wizard of the same age, I thought it was just a malicious joke. But now it seems that I understand. You have already completed the first stage of soul mutation at such a young age. You have also cultivated soul defense energy. Not bad, not bad." He did not mean to overhear, but Jackman was shocked. Although he knew that Heath's strength was not ordinary, he did not expect that he had already finished the first stage of soul mutation. No wonder he had lost so completely. Heath was also shocked. He could clearly see Heath's strength just by looking at him. After all, Heath was already at the late stage of the beginner stage. He quickly bowed and said, "It's an honor to meet you." Orinoco said, "Let's go. Let's go back to the tower and talk. After saying that, he let go of the watering can and handed it to a vine beside him. Then, he waved his right hand forward. As he moved, a large magic array suddenly appeared under their feet. The spatial runes on the magic array indicated the identity of the magic array. A strange spatial distortion was felt. The pressure on his body tightened and then loosened. With a whoosh, Heath had already arrived at another place. This was a reception room. From the view outside the cross-shaped window, they should be inside the tower. Obviously, this place was similar to what Heath had set up for his lighthouse. Spatial magic arrays were set up around the tower. Have a seat. What do you want to drink? Cocoa. Thank you. Orinoco did not waste any time. After sitting down, he asked straightforwardly, I heard Jackman say that you need purple coral. Is that so? Heath nodded. Yes. Orinoco pondered for a moment and said, since you have completed the first stage of soul mutation, and your strength has reached the late stage of a beginner wizard, if I'm not wrong, you need the purple coral to concoct the sublimation water to prepare for the advancement to an intermediate level wizard. Is that right? Heath did not hide anything. Yes. Not long after Heath finished speaking, Orinoco and Jackman locked eyes. Heath noticed that both of their faces were filled with joy. Did something happen? While Heath was surprised, Orinoco suddenly said, Wizard Heath, maybe we can discuss a deal in detail. Chapter 295, Foreign Aid. Heath asked doubtfully, trade? Orinoco nodded and said, that's right. Jackman, you brought him here. Why don't you explain it to me? Yes, teacher. Jackman explained to Heath, Heath, do you remember the deep sea feast that I mentioned to you before? Heath asked, the feast that the heart of the sea gathered. Jackman nodded. Yes, the heart of the sea matures once every 30 years, and then the wizards of the Golden Islands will hold a deep sea feast. That's what I told you at that time. Please allow me to apologize to you here, because there are some parts of the deep sea feast that I haven't fully explained. After a pause, he continued, for example, although the deep sea feast is mainly about the distribution of the heart of the sea, it also concerns the distribution of some benefits between the wizard organizations of our Golden Islands. Heath raised his eyebrows. Jackman explained, our Golden Islands believes that outstanding people should get more resources. This is the case for apprentices, wizards, and wizard organizations. And the deep sea feast is related to the distribution of certain benefits. The higher the rank of the wizard organizations in the deep sea feast, the more benefits they will get. It is precisely because of this that every time the deep sea feast is held, every wizard organization will do their best to send the most outstanding wizards from their respective wizard organizations to participate in this banquet. There are no exceptions. But at this point, he changed the topic. There is a rule in the deep sea feast. The strength of the wizards who participate in the deep sea feast cannot be higher than rank 2. Only beginner wizards are allowed to participate. Hearing this, Heath seemed to have some clues. He said in puzzlement, so. Orinoco continued, yes, we hope that you can be a wizard of deep sea kiss and participate in this banquet in our place. There was a huge gap between every level of wizards. A wizard like Heath, who had already reached the late stage of rank 1, was already several times stronger than ordinary wizards. Once he entered, he would definitely have a huge advantage. Heath was puzzled. But I'm not a wizard of deep sea kiss. Jackman smiled. It doesn't matter. The Golden Islands is an open area for wizards. No wizard organization would object to foreign guests. Even in such a grand event, recruiting foreign aid is allowed. What Heath was not clear about was that due to the special geographical location of the Golden Islands, the interests were intertwined. In particular, the conflict between the Golden Islands and the Sea Folk had been erupting for a long time. They were simply unable to withstand the Sea Folk's rampage. Because of this, the wizards of the Golden Islands paid special attention to their relationship with the wizard world. Other than the Dark Wizards, all outstanding wizards, regardless of where they came from, could be treated with courtesy here. The other party recruited and roped in wizards. At the same time, they were also the force behind the wizards they roped in, so that they could get help from outside forces when they encountered trouble in the future. Heath said, I see. He now understood why Jackman had been so enthusiastic toward him along the way. The feeling was that he was waiting here. Then, Heath could not help but ponder. He was still very interested in the heart of the sea that Jackman had described, especially the refinement of magic power. After advancing to an intermediate wizard, this was an inevitable step for him. It would be good if he could prepare in advance. However, he did not know much about this deep-sea feast. Who knew if there would be any danger? Seeing Heath's hesitation, Jackman could not help but say, "My friend, there's no need to give us an answer now. You can go back and seriously think about it. Regardless of whether you accept it or not, we will always be friends." Orinoco said, "If you finally make the decision to represent our deep-sea kiss, then I will prepare the purple coral you need for you." Orinoco's strength was definitely one of the best in deep-sea kiss. However, because he was a foreign wizard, he could not enter deep-sea kiss power core and could not obtain more resources and benefits. If he could perform well in the deep-sea feast, then he would take off his hat and enter deep-sea kiss power core. After a pause, Orinoco said earnestly, "This is a very good opportunity for both us and you. I hope Wizard Heath will seriously consider." After thinking for 2 days, Heath quickly made a decision to participate in the competition. After returning from Orinoco's place that day, Heath had investigated this deep-sea feast in detail. He had looked up relevant information in the library, looked for the apprentices of the deep-sea kiss, and so on. In short, after some investigation, Heath had finally understood the various matters of this deep-sea feast. It was roughly what Jackman had told him, which was to gather a group of wizards in one place to pick the heart of the sea. There was a certain degree of danger, but it was not fatal. Heath felt that with his strength that was infinitely close to that of an intermediate wizard, he should be very confident in this matter. He had enough confidence, and at the same time, he could obtain the purple coral. He could also prepare in advance for the future refinement of magic power. There was no reason for him not to participate in this matter of killing 3 birds with 1 stone. "Haha, it's great that you've agreed. My friend, you've really made the right decision. When the time comes, we'll fight together. I believe that will definitely bring glory to deep-sea kiss. We might even be able to get into the top 3 in the competition. If there's anything you need help with, just let us know. Let us prepare well for this." Jackman, who had received Heath's reply, appeared to be exceptionally happy. Not only did he praise Heath, he even generously asked Heath to name any conditions. Seeing that, Heath did not stand on ceremony. It just so happened that he had recently been interested in the contents of Deep-Sea Kiss Wizard level library, so he simply made this request. "Wizard library? This? You are really not polite at all. That is the core knowledge that Deep-Sea Kiss wizards have spent a huge amount of money to accumulate. It is the most precious resource of Deep-Sea Kiss. It is not completely impossible. Let me help you apply first. However, I cannot guarantee that it will succeed. Even if you do apply, it'll probably only take a few days. You have to think of the information you need to look up in advance. The books inside can't be taken out." After Jackman's hard work, he successfully applied for 7 days for Heath. This was a standard lending time. Most wizard organizations had this kind of time in their closed databases for outsiders. This rule allowed people to check their knowledge while avoiding the loss of precious knowledge. After all, 7 days was too short, especially in the field of magic. No matter how smart a wizard was, he could only complete 1 knowledge point in 7 days. Even if 1 knowledge point was taken away by an outsider, it was not an unacceptable loss. However, the wizards did not know that there were wizards in this world who were not bound by ordinary rules, and it was precisely this kind of cognitive bias that would always bring about astonishing results. Chapter 296, Blessing. A few days later, Deep-Sea Kiss, the beach by the sea. Hawa! 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 The sea water washed up on the beach again and again, and then slowly retreated, staining the beach with grey wet spots. Heath stood by the beach, holding a conch in his hand and gently blowing it. The air current passed through the conch and made a low and strange sound, somewhat like the low cry of a whale in the sea. A shallow ripple appeared on the surface of the sea in the distance, and then the ripple became more and more intense. It was vaguely visible that a figure seemed to have risen from the bottom of the sea. Splash! A clear sound of flowing water was heard. A beautiful blonde girl jumped out of the sea. The big fish tail behind her revealed the identity of the other party, the legendary mermaid. The girl lay on a reef above the sea and said to Heath on the shore, "Who taught you the song?" Heath said, "I heard from my apprentice. I heard that I can make you appear as long as I play my lover on the sea." The mermaid that appeared on the sea was none other than Nami, whom Heath had met on the day he came to Deep-Sea Kiss. Nami said, "Oh. It seems that I should learn how to keep a secret, but what should I do? Mermaids can't stand secrets, and they all confide in the conches, and these conches will eventually fall into the hands of the apprentices. She pulled her hair in distress. Forget it, you'll know when you know. There's nothing to hide anyway. Her furrowed brows relaxed, then she shook her hair and turned her head around. Her face was full of her usual bright smile. Then, strange wizard, why did you summon Nami? Heath said, I want you to bless me. There was another ingredient needed to concoct sublimation water, which was the blessing of a high-level demonized creature. This was the effect of the auxiliary additive of sublimation water, which would affect the success rate of the concoction of sublimation water. The first thing that Heath thought of was this mermaid that lived in the inland sea. Although there were many high-level demonized creatures, there were not many who could give blessings. The mermaid of the sea folk race was just one of them. Nami's eyes lit up, she said in surprise, your soul and spirit make me unable to feel the traces of the passage of time. It's really unexpected. You can become an intermediate wizard at such a young age. Are you a legendary magic genius? Heath shrugged. I'm just lucky. Nami shook her head. Luck is also a part of strength. After a pause, she hesitated for a moment, and said in a low voice, it's not impossible for me to give you my blessing. But according to the principle of equal exchange of wizards, what price is Mr. Wizard prepared to pay for this? Heath raised his eyebrows. What does Miss Nami want? Nami did not hesitate. A pair of legs. Human legs? Heath asked, so, you really want to stick to the legend? When Nami first went to the sea to sing to attract sailors, she was not experienced enough to pull the sailors into the sea. Instead, she was caught in the fishing net and was almost killed. However, the sailor who caught her did not hurt her. Instead, he cut open the fishing net and let her go back to the sea. Although mermaids were a cruel race, they were also grateful. Nami was going to give the young sailor a treasure in the sea, but before she could say it, the sailor had already left her and returned to land. So Nami decided to go to land to find the sailor. She deliberately came to Deep Sea Kiss to find a pair of human legs from the wizards here. Heath said, forgive me for being blunt, but I'm afraid this is not a good idea. The wizards are not willing to operate on you because you can't pay enough magic stones. A high-level demonized creature who wanted a transformation spell like Nami would not be permanent. To have legs, one could only use body modification. It was not easy to modify the body of a high-level demonized creature. Even Heath's current strength was not fully assured to do it. Nami said affirmatively, no matter how big the risk is, I'm willing to take it. Heath was a little hesitant. Nami said, don't wizards always accept equal exchange? Is it because my blessing is not enough to pay the price? Heath's eyebrows relaxed. I'll help you with the surgery after I return from the deep sea feast. Before that, you should prepare the materials. Nami let out a long sigh of joy. Aha, I finally don't have to collect those disgusting and troublesome aquatic plants anymore. I finally don't have to do those strange experiments for the wizards anymore. Let the magic stones go to hell. After agreeing to the agreement of Deep Sea Kiss, Heath had successfully obtained a purple coral from Orinoco. Now, with Nami's blessing, all the materials to prepare the sublimation water were ready. Heath did not delay any further and immediately began to prepare the sublimation water. Actually, according to the classification, sublimation water was already a rank 2 magic potion. With Heath's current strength as a beginner rank wizard, it was still quite difficult. According to his original plan, he planned to wait for a period of time. Only after reaching the peak of the beginner rank would he prepare it. This way, he would have more confidence. However, the plan could not keep up with the rapid changes. In order to give Heath more confidence in the deep sea feast, Orinoco also agreed to help Heath concoct the sublimation water. According to the rules set by the Golden Islands, the wizards participating in the deep sea feast could only be at the beginner rank. However, if the wizards were to advance to the intermediate rank during the deep sea feast, this was also in accordance with the rules. Heath's current strength was already at the late stage of the beginner rank, and he was not far from reaching the peak. If he brought sublimation water into the deep sea feast and advanced, there was no doubt that he had a good chance of winning during the deep sea feast. Because of this, Orinoco also participated in Heath's potion preparation. With the help of this advanced level wizard, Heath naturally did not need to wait any longer. Deep Sea Kiss, Orinoco's potion lab. Bang! A ball of colorful flames rose from the large black pot. Orinoco casually threw a ball of starry grass into the black pot, then picked up the short wand next to him, and started stirring. Adding some starry grass is better. During the process of sublimation, sometimes we will lose our way, and the starry grass can light up our souls, allowing us to find the place we should go when we are lost. It's best to stir the potion clockwise. The properties of sublimation water belong to the positive energy element. If it's counterclockwise, it will inevitably cause the elements to react in the opposite direction. It was probably because Heath's addition had indeed helped Orinoco a lot, or perhaps it was because of Orinoco's personality. In short, he did not guard against knowledge like other wizards. On the contrary, he generously taught Heath some experience while concocting the potion. Heath stood at the side, holding a notebook in his hand. He recorded every single thing Orinoco said in detail so that he could digest it in the future. At this moment, Orinoco picked up a potion bottle. Inside the bottle was a substance that was as shiny as starlight. This was none other than the blessing of the mermaid, Nami. Looking at the starlight, Orinoco said in surprise, "The smell of a mermaid. Did you get this from the little mermaid in the grey sea?" Heath nodded and said, "Miss Nami is very generous." Orinoco suddenly asked, "Why? Did you promise her? Give her a pair of legs." Chapter 297, Begin. Heath said, "Yes." Orinoco was silent for a moment. Heath raised his eyebrows. "What's wrong?" "I'm trading according to the principle of equivalent exchange. Is there anything wrong with that?" He had not heard that trading with Nami was forbidden. Otherwise, he would not have rashly asked for Nami's blessing. Orinoco frowned. "It's nothing. It's just that. Although the principle of equivalent exchange is what we wizards rely on for a living, sometimes it's not necessary to abide by this principle. While pursuing benefits, it's best to." After thinking for a while, Orinoco shook his head and said, "Forget it, let's not talk about it. Let's just trade. Everyone has their own fate. Since this little mermaid has repeatedly asked to leave the sea, it might not be a bad thing for her to go to land." In the next few days, Heath stayed in Deep Sea Kiss to cultivate. In order to let Heath obtain good results to a greater extent, Deep Sea Kiss had invested a lot of resources. Basically, whether it was materials or potions, he was all given the greatest degree of support. With these resources and the extraction system, Heath's strength could be described as advancing by leaps and bounds. Basically, he could have a very obvious improvement every day. In this process, time flew by quickly. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. At the same time, the deep sea feast had finally begun. The Golden Islands, the door to the deep sea. The door to the deep sea was a spatial crack located in the northwest of the Golden Islands. Through this spatial crack, one could access one of the largest secret realms in the Golden Islands, the Mysterious Sea. It was said to be a mysterious land left behind during the Age of the Gods. There were all kinds of precious materials growing in it, and the most famous one was undoubtedly the Golden Islands' specialty, the Heart of the Sea. Unlike the other open secret realms in the Golden Islands, which could be accessed at any time, the Mysterious Sea was a closed secret realm. It was only open to the outside once every 30 years, and due to the influence of some special power. All powers above rank 1 wizard level would be blocked outside, and only those below the rank of a beginner wizard could enter. At this moment, it was the largest gathering of wizards in the Golden Islands once every 30 years, the Deep Sea Feast. Ships from various wizard organizations from the Golden Islands had gathered here. Everyone spread out in a circle around a small sea area in the middle, which was probably a circle. It was faintly emitting a faint luster. The wizards who were familiar with the Golden Islands all knew what that place was. That was the area where the door to the deep sea was located. On the deck of the wizard ship of the Deep Sea Kiss, Wizard Orinoco was explaining the relevant matters to the wizards who were about to participate in the Deep Sea Feast. After entering, don't be in a hurry to find the heart of the sea. The first thing is to find a safe place and ensure your own safety. Look at the map more often and keep an eye out for changes in the sea. Any dangerous situation in the Mysterious Sea can happen. You must be careful when picking. Sneak attacks, robberies, ambushes, these are everywhere. If you can't hold on any longer, use the magic scroll as soon as possible. It's man-made. As long as you do your best, it's enough. Do you all remember? The participating wizards on the deck said one after another. Yes, teacher. I'll remember, Professor Orinoco. Of course. Including Heath, there were more than 10 wizards sent by Deep Sea Kiss to participate in the Deep Sea Feast this time. Including Heath, there were as many as 5 official-level wizards. The wizard organizations on the Golden Islands were generally stronger than those on the West Coast. For example, Deep Sea Kiss was only a middle-level wizard organization on the Golden Islands. It was not even a ruler. However, there were already more than 20 wizards that they could take out. Even when compared to Shadow Tower at its peak, they were on par. They were even slightly stronger in terms of high-end combat strength. For example, in a banquet, they could easily drag 5 or 6 wizards to participate. If it was any other wizard organization, it would be unimaginable. Professor Orinoco, if we encounter other wizard organizations' apprentices while we are picking the heart of the sea, should we kill them? At this time, a young fat man suddenly asked. The emblem on the cloak showed that he was an official wizard on the same level as Heath and the others. Orinoco nodded. Do your best to defeat the opponent, or force them to use scrolls to leave the Deep Sea Feast. Because of the limited number of Heart of the Sea, the Deep Sea Feast was also a competition. Each organization would send a fixed number of wizards to enter. Whether or not they could get the Heart of the Sea depended on their strength. In order to ensure the safety of the participating wizards, before entering the mysterious sea area, the wizards would take a teleportation scroll with them. Once they encountered a situation that they could not contend against, they could leave through the scroll. Of course, this kind of protection was not perfect. The dangers in the mysterious sea were countless. Basically, there would be people who lost their lives at every Deep Sea Feast. Sometimes it was the apprentices, and sometimes it was the wizards. It's starting. The gate is coming. What a big gate! Is that the legendary door to the deep sea? At this moment, there was an intense commotion in the crowd. Everyone's attention was focused on the glowing sea. The sea suddenly boiled like boiling water. Accompanied by the boiling sea water, an exceptionally majestic door slowly rose from the bottom of the sea. It was a hollow door made of 2 stone pillars and a crossbeam. Its appearance was similar to an ordinary stone door, but it was too huge. It seemed to be more than 100 meters tall. It stood on the ground like a small mountain. There was no door plate in the middle of the stone door. Instead, there was a layer of transparent film that filled the entire space. It was as if there was a layer of cling film on the stone door. Through the cling film, one could vaguely see the blurry world behind. Heath looked curiously at the stone door, the door to the deep sea. It was said that this was a product left behind since the age of the gods. It was built by the sea god, the siren. There was a part of the siren's divine power attached to it, and that divine power still existed even today. These should be the space runes of the ancient times. Is this the space transfer spell that they formed? The stone pillars of the stone door were covered with strange runes, like twisted tadpoles. They were the rule-type runes that Heath had seen before. In the wizard library of Deep Sea Kiss, Heath had successfully found knowledge about the rule-type runes. These obscure runes were no longer the arcane books of the past in his eyes, and through the description of these runes, he had a rough understanding of their function. It was a space transfer spell. It would be great if I could get the core structure of this spell. The space transfer spell in the ancient times was much more powerful than the one now, he thought greedily. Crash! At this moment, the stone door had completely risen to the surface of the sea, and at the same time, the ships docked on the surface of the sea were all boiling. It's coming up, the stone gate is coming up. The Deep Sea Feast. The Deep Sea Feast. Amidst the cheers of the people, the largest wizard organization in the Golden Islands, the ruler of the Golden Islands, a wizard from Sea Crown, slowly rose into the air. After a long opening speech, the wizard announced loudly, I declare that this year's Deep Sea Feast has officially begun. Chapter 298. Enter. It's starting. It's starting. My heart of the sea, I'm coming. The victor will definitely belong to me. The crowd was in an uproar as they steered the small boats one after another towards the front gate. Let's go too, Heath. Teacher, let's go. After greeting Orinoco, the group came to the side of the boat and went down from the hanging ladder. There were already more than 10 small boats below the deck, and everyone jumped onto a small boat. The small boat followed the crowd and rushed to the front door. Then, we'll meet inside, my friend. The wizards participating in the Deep Sea Feast would be randomly teleported to any area of the mysterious sea. Okay. Controlling the small boat, Heath followed the large group and slowly sailed towards the main door in the middle of the sea. These small boats were specially made wizard boats, and they could be controlled freely with spiritual power. Sizzle. A special distortion and pressure that was unique to teleportation came from all directions. Heath only felt his vision blur and soon arrived at an unfamiliar place. This was a greyish-black sea, as if it was experiencing a storm. Under the boat were dark waves, and the sky was dark clouds. Bolts of lightning tore through the sky, and a violent roar resounded through the sky. Rumble. The small boat was swept away by the waves when it suddenly entered such a turbulent sea. Heath, who was unprepared, staggered, and almost fell to the ground. He hurriedly took the horse stance in an attempt to suppress the swaying small boat. However, even his grand knight physique paled in comparison to the violent waves. Damn it! Is this a storm? What a huge wave! I'm going to fall into the sea. Someone help me! There were still dozens of wizard apprentices who had been teleported to this area with Heath. From their spiritual senses, they were only apprentices. The weak ones were immediately swayed by the waves, a few apprentices even fell into the sea. Crash! Before the boat could regain control, a huge wave dozens of meters high swept over from afar. It was as dark as a fallen mountain. The surrounding apprentices could not help but gasp at this scene. Oh my god! What the hell, what should we do? It's over, we're finished. Sigh, we failed. Some of the apprentices stood on the ship in shock, not moving at all. Some even took out the teleportation scrolls distributed by the organization and opened them. Only a few of the apprentices gritted their teeth and cast defensive spells in an attempt to resist. However, in the face of such a huge wave, their meager strength was destined to be in vain. Even Heath, who was a wizard, could not help but widen his eyes when he saw the huge wave. Although with his current strength, it was not impossible for him to block a wave of this level, Heath felt that there was no need for that. Before the wave came, he simply jumped into the deep sea beside him. The situation on the surface of the sea was too terrible. It was better to hide in the deep sea for the time being. He raised his right hand, and the space glove in Heath's hand flashed. Soon, a small iron box was in his hand. When the box was opened, two parotid-like objects were brought into his field of vision. He took out the mermaid sea gills and put them on both sides of his cheeks. Heath successfully recovered his smooth breathing. At this time, the waves on the surface of the sea had completely collapsed. The fragile wooden boat was smashed into pieces in front of the huge waves. Both the apprentices who were defending themselves and those who were standing there in a daze fell into the sea. Some of the apprentices fainted and then disappeared into the sea with a flash of light. That was the result of the protection mechanism of the teleportation scroll being activated. Some of the apprentices had to use the teleportation scroll after struggling for a while. Only a few of the apprentices cast shape-shifting spells to turn into small fish and temporarily escaped the disaster. Most of the wizards in the Golden Islands' shape-shifting spells would first target a fish. Otherwise, if it was a land-type wizard who had mastered shape-shifting spells, they would have no choice but to watch helplessly. Heath took a look. There were dozens of apprentices who had just entered with him, but there were less than 5 of them who were still in the sea, including him. This was less than a few minutes after he had entered the sea. The elimination rate is really not low. Shaking his head, Heath looked away. Then, he took out the map given by Deep Sea Kiss. This was a special magic map of the mysterious sea area. It recorded the detailed map of the area and showed his location on the map. These islands are very close to each other. Which island should I go to first? There were a total of 64 islands in the entire mysterious sea area, and from the map, there were 3 islands that were almost at the same location as Heath. Let's go to this Iceland first. After thinking for a while, Heath quickly chose one of the islands, then he waved his hands and swam towards the direction of that island. Time passed bit by bit, and soon, more than 2 hours had passed. It had to be said that the human body was not suitable for moving in the sea. After swimming for more than 2 hours, he had only swum dozens of miles, and he was at least hundreds of miles away from the island. It seems that I should find some means of transportation. Although the waves on the surface of the sea were torrential, the deep sea was still as calm as usual. Sea fish and sea crabs of all kinds were swimming in groups under the deep sea. Yes, sea turtle. Looking around, Heath soon saw a big sea turtle lazily lying on a big rock. You're it. Heath pushed the surface of the water away and swam towards the big sea turtle. Soon, he was about 100 meters away from the big sea turtle. The sea turtle lying on the big rock immediately became alert. However, before it could swim out, an invisible force field swept over and instantly fixed the sea turtle on the rock in place. After fixing the turtle, Heath came to the front of the turtle and stared at it with his eyes. He instantly cast a darkness spell, hypnosis. The turtle's originally terrified expression slowly calmed down, and then completely became sluggish. Even after Heath released the wizard's force field, it no longer tried to struggle or escape. Looking at the turtle in front of him, Heath grinned. Now it's easy. The sea turtle was about 2 meters tall, and he could easily lie on its huge body. Let's go. Heath sat on the sea turtle and patted its thick shell. Although a creature like the sea turtle moved slowly on land, its speed in the sea was absolutely nothing to be said. With this one motion, it was like a sharp arrow shot out. It was many times faster than Heath's previous swimming. After traveling at such a high speed for a few hours, the island shown on the map was very close to them. Chapter 299 Iceland. Splash! A huge turtle jumped out of the water. Heath sat on the back of the turtle and looked at the island in front of him. The island was not big. It was about a few thousand meters in size. It was a small white island. From afar, it looked like it was covered with a layer of white paint. When he got closer, he could see that the white was actually snow, covering the entire island. The temperature was not low, but the island looked like a world of ice and snow. The wind and snow came from above the island. There was a layer of dark clouds floating there, and snow was falling down from the dark clouds. It was very strange. Thank you, Brother Turtle. When he came to the shallows, Heath jumped off the turtle and then released his mental control over the turtle. The turtle, who had regained its consciousness, was obviously shocked. It hurriedly patted the sand and fled back into the sea. After bidding farewell to the turtle, Heath walked to the island. This snow. The first time he went to the island, Heath felt an unusual chill. As a Grand Knight, his physical fitness had reached a terrifying number. In theory, he wouldn't feel much even if he was in a few degrees below zero or if he jumped into the ice water. However, as the wind and snow fell on his body, Heath clearly felt a chill. Upon careful observation, layers of ice flowers were frozen on his skin. Such high ice elemental damage, Heath hurriedly took out a cloak from his interspatial ring. It was a grey cloak. The cloak was branded with fiery red patterns, like dancing flames. This was the flaming cloak. Heath had used the materials he got from Aramstead when he was bored to make a wizard tool. He used the elemental fire element that he was most familiar with. The cloak contained an abundance of fire energy. It was originally used to increase the bonus when casting fire spells. However, under such circumstances, it was just enough to offset the damage from the falling ice. I sigh. After putting on the cloak, Heath softly chanted a syllable. The flame runes on the cloak immediately lit up simultaneously. Immediately after, a warm feeling surged out from the cloak and quickly enveloped his entire body. The cold that was originally there quickly disappeared. This is much more comfortable. With a sigh of admiration, Heath put on the cloak and walked towards the depths of the island. It was not much different from the large number of islands in the sea before. This was a small white island. In the depths of the ice and snow world, all that could be seen was pure white snow. The treetops, grass, and roads were already covered in a thick layer of snow. With a single step, it was almost knee-high. There were also many plants growing on the island, but most of them were of the ice element. The frost flower, frozen grass, cold fruit, and so on were all substances that only grew in places where the ice element was extremely dense. After seeing these substances, Heath's eyes could not help but light up. Good stuff. These materials were all substances that could only be produced when the ice element reached a certain level of density. Regardless of how much they were worth, they were definitely very rare materials on the market. More importantly, Heath had never extracted these materials before. He waved his right hand, and a frost flower was quickly pulled into his hand. Extract. As soon as he finished speaking, a series of electronic notifications sounded in Heath's ears. Beep, extraction successful. Spiritual power plus 0.03 beep, extraction successful. Soul energy plus 13. Beep, extraction successful. Ice element affinity plus 2%. Heath's eyes lit up. Element affinity. The last time he obtained an element affinity was when he was an apprentice. He had taken part in the tournament and obtained the Holy Spirit flower. Although he had obtained countless materials over the years, there was really nothing that could increase his affinity. I can't believe that there would be such an unexpected harvest in the Golden Islands this time. Heath was extremely happy. Although 2% ice affinity was not much, it could be considered as an entry point. In the future, learning ice spells would be a little easier than before. Wizards divided elemental affinity into 10 levels. 1 point was the lowest and 10 points were the highest. Heath's highest affinity was in the direction of fire, which exceeded 7 points. It was also his major element. Let's see if other materials can be extracted. With this experience in mind, Heath immediately searched for various ice materials in the surroundings. As expected, he quickly extracted the affinity of ice elements from a cold fruit. It seems that elemental affinity can only be extracted from materials with a high concentration of certain elements. Through this verification, Heath could roughly understand the conditions for extracting elemental affinity. He could not help but secretly plan in his heart to collect more high-concentration substances that targeted a single element in the future to increase elemental affinity. For example, high fire elemental substances could increase the affinity of fire elements, or even max it out. As he silently planned in his heart, Heath continued to extract all the way in. Most of the materials on the island were extremely rare outside, and it was impossible for Heath to extract them. Therefore, the system was constantly ringing throughout the island. A large number of attributes could be retrieved at any time and place. As he walked and stopped, Heath soon arrived at the center of the island. After arriving here, some strange scenery quickly attracted his attention. Ice sculptures. In the depths of the forest, there were ice sculptures. They were all human-shaped sculptures, most of them wearing cloaks. They looked like wizards like Heath. He didn't know which master had created these ice sculptures. Their expressions were so vivid that they looked like real people at first glance. Well. Wait. Suddenly, Heath seemed to have discovered something. He moved closer to the ice sculptures and realized that these ice sculptures were not sculpted at all. Instead, they were left behind by pure living people after they were frozen. It seems that these ice sculptures were formed not too long ago. Are they also apprentices who came here? Then what could have caused them to become ice sculptures? After examining it in detail for a while, Heath could not help but be puzzled. Although the snowstorm that kept drifting in the sky contained very strong ice elements, it should not be enough to cause people to become ice sculptures. What on earth could have caused all this? While Heath was thinking, suddenly, an unusual spiritual fluctuation came from the forest. And then, Heath soon knew the origin of the ice sculptures. Chapter 300 Abnormal. Standing outside the forest, Heath looked at the dense ice sculptures in the forest. These ice sculptures were hollow. Judging from the remaining spiritual power on them, they should have been real people not long ago. It was likely that the apprentices who had entered the forest had encountered some kind of accident and were all frozen into ice sculptures. Then, they triggered the protection mechanism on the scroll and were sent out, leaving behind ice sculptures here. What did it do? To be able to freeze a person into an ice sculpture in an instant, it had to be at least at the level of a wizard. However, Heath did not find any material of this level in the surroundings. Was it in the forest? Upon closer inspection, the forest in front of him was indeed somewhat unusual. The trees growing in the forest were much more sparse than the surrounding trees, and all of them were snowflake trees. This kind of plant that looked like a birch tree was a kind of magic plant that grew in an ice and snow environment. It would only grow in places where the ice element was extremely dense. It would bear a fruit called the ice fruit. It was very popular among demonized creatures, and because of this, many demonized creatures would usually reside around the snowflake trees. However, at a glance, the forest was abnormally calm. There were no demonized creatures in the surroundings either. This was indeed a little strange. Should I go in and take a look? The heart of the sea appeared randomly. There would be some unusual situations where the heart of the sea appeared. It seemed that everything that happened before his eyes was most likely due to the heart of the sea. Just as he was thinking about this, Heath suddenly frowned and looked behind him. Just now, he could clearly feel a spiritual fluctuation coming from behind him. Someone was coming, and from the route, it seemed like they were heading to the forest in front of him. Let the others test the waters first. After thinking for a while, Heath chanted a short spell, and his figure instantly disappeared from where he was. It was the invisibility spell that he had used for many years. He had not improved much on the invisibility spell over the years. However, from his spiritual senses, he could tell that the few people who had come were only at the apprentice level. The invisibility spell alone was enough for them to overlook him. After waiting for a while, he heard footsteps coming from behind, followed by a series of voices. This damned place, it's freezing. Why is there such a strange island in the ocean? Haru, how much longer do we have to keep going? The heart of the sea can appear anywhere. We have to at least search the entire island. Oh my god! Then how long do we have to stay in this ice and snow? If we knew this would happen, we would have been better off floating in the ocean. Speaking of which, did you see the wizard who came in with us? He should have come here as well, right? Who knows? Maybe he drowned in the sea. How is that possible? That's a wizard. So what if he's a wizard? Even if he's a wizard, he won't be able to last long in that deep sea without a shape-shifting spell. There were 3 apprentices who came. They were all male and looked like they were in their 20s. The spiritual age of their souls was similar. The 3 of them walked here as they talked. Soon, they saw the forest in front of them. One of the apprentices said, "Oh! Look, that's what's going on. There are so many ice sculptures." Really? How could these ice sculptures appear out of nowhere in this world of ice and snow? Could it be? The more abnormal the place, the more likely it was to produce the heart of the sea. In an instant, several apprentices blurted out, "Heart of the sea!" The 3 apprentices' eyes lit up, and they immediately rushed in. "Quick, go in and look. Maybe there's a heart of the sea here. Look carefully. Don't let go of any corner. If you find the heart of the sea, you must give it to me first. In your dreams. If you really find it, it's mine too. Damn it, do you want to die? With just you? Then come and try it. I've been annoyed with you for a long time. Don't think that I don't know that you used despicable methods to get Ruth into bed." For some reason, the 3 apprentices suddenly became irritable and fell into an argument. The 2 apprentices even took out their wands and looked like they were about to fight. Heath frowned. Is this a spiritual spell? He clearly felt that the spiritual waves in the forest suddenly became abnormal, which was also the main reason for the changes in the mood of the apprentices. "Let's have a duel, a spar. Today, I'll show you who the real wizard is. Then let's fight. Damn it, do you guys have to force me to fight?" The 3 apprentices finally could not control their emotions and started fighting. At that moment, the 3 of them waved their magic wands and summoned frost, lightning, fireballs, and other spells at each other. 3. Rumble. Crackle. Intense explosions rang throughout the forest, and all kinds of magic beams flashed one after another. Damn! Damn it, Haru, you bastard! Even if I become a ghost, I will not let the 2 of you off. Damn! The battle ended very quickly. 2 of the apprentices were covered in blood as they fell to the snow. Although they were quickly teleported out of the snow by the teleportation scroll, judging from the injuries on their bodies, they would not be able to recover in a short period of time even if they were out. Although the deep sea feast was mainly a trial-type competition, there were quite a number of apprentices who were injured or even lost their lives in this competition. Ha, ha ha, 2 pieces of trash, you still want to fight with me? The only remaining apprentice was standing in the snow covered in blood, panting heavily. The steam that was like white fog was constantly spewing out of his mouth and filling the air. Huff! Huff! At this moment, a gust of cold wind blew over from afar and swept up a large amount of snow on the ground. The wind and snow between heaven and earth suddenly became stronger unknowingly. The snow that was as white as goose feathers fell on the snow one after another and landed on the apprentice's hair, face, skin, and arms. In the clear cracking sound, layers of frost suddenly bloomed on the apprentice's body, and soon, a layer of shallow ice flowers had formed. However, the apprentice who was in the middle of it seemed to be unaware of it. All he knew was to stand on the spot and celebrate his victory. His eyes were excited. It's coming. Heath's mind was suddenly focused. A strong elemental fluctuation sounded in the forest. With this violent elemental fluctuation, a large number of snowflakes swept up and wrapped around the apprentice in the forest. At the same time, Heath finally understood what was going on in the forest.